This episode of How To Wrestling is brought to you by our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How To Wrestling, where, hey, if you like the show and you want to support myself and Joe and our upcoming child, you can over there for as little as $5 a month to get access to nearly a decade's worth of pay-per-view reviews from WWE and AEW. As well as that, we've got ongoing series like Totally Divas, Pay-Per-View Classic, new episode dropping imminently, and the fans have deemed that it's only right that we watch WCW Uncensored 1996. The baby's gonna have to learn about the Doomsday Tower of Cage Doom match some point, I guess. Find out all of our thoughts on the comings and goings of modern wrestling and keep up to date with all the comings and goings here of How To Wrestling and become our backer. But now it's time to perhaps turn on natural born killers. It's time for How To New Jack. Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of How To Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows, maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. And today's episode, sorry, stop, you gotta, we literally can't, we'll get in trouble and we can't afford that, definitely. Today's episode's all about the original gangster of wrestling. Today is all about New Jack. Once again, it's me, your old pal, Captain Kevin, joined as I am by my currently pregnant co-host and partner, Joe Graham.
Hello.
Joe, this is one of these episodes that I think we've been informed by social services you had to record before you give birth, because if New Jack footage was being played on when there's a little baby in this house,
yeah, it's illegal.
we might get him taken away.
Yeah.
It's an interesting episode. A change of pace from those friendly bushwhackers down under.
Wow. I mean, hard whiplash from the bushwhackers. Not so hard whiplash from the sheep herders, though.
No, this is one of these episodes, though, that I think is very much, we have went from one side of what is considered wrestling right through its hardcore center to the other side of what is considered wrestling. Yes, this is all technically the same art form, the same type of programming, the same pastime and pursuit. What did you ever know? This is a name that's kind of whispered all throughout the time we've been doing How To Wrestling. I think a lot of people assumed you'd never do an episode of it. Like, I would try and keep New Jack away from you. A man he's got quite a complex legacy. I guess he's going to ask, what had you ever heard over the years about him? Had he ever come up?
Yeah, no, he's one of those names where, especially when I was a new fan, a lot of wrestling fans be like, yeah, have you heard about Mae Young's hand? Yeah, have you heard about Katie Vick? Have you heard about New Jack?
These are like, we've got my varied hand here,
Yeah.
We're crawling through the spoil wrestling for a new fan dungeon.
The spectrum of controversy.
Well, if the hand doesn't get you, New Jack will, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why was he brought up kind of like as a boogeyman of sorts, or kind of like a negative sense in that way, would you say?
I don't know if I could say for sure if it was supposed to be brought up in a negative. I think it was more shock value, like...
Right.
Because I heard about, like, the homicides that have allegedly occurred.
More on that in this episode, folks. Let's just say, this is an interesting episode where we are kind of crossing into very much the world of what feels like true crime, but then when we looked closer and closer at it, it's like, hey, wait a minute, like, this is just wrestling.
Yeah.
And I think that is what's interesting here, is that in many respects, this is a character we're dealing with today who feels not a part of wrestling. But I think the more and more research that we have done, and he's been a man who's been very much examined in the last few years, particularly with his passing a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
His legacy has been examined, and it unlike a lot of other wrestlers, that when they pass away, it's like, well, here's the truth. It feels like the exaggerations, the lies, the truths, and the falsehoods have all been mixed into this kind of complicated soup.
Well, it's funny you say that, because like when I was told about the justifiable homicides or whatever it was kind of all mixed up in the same stories as him throwing people off scaffolding and stabbing guys in the match. And to me, I wrongly thought that the justifiable homicides had occurred in a wrestling ring.
I mean, there's a lot of people, though, who listen to this, I think, believe that.
That's
because
it.
that is the kind of...
There's so much.
There's so much out there, and I think, he is, in some respects, a product not just of the exaggerating the story's nature of wrestling, but also the fact that wrestling attracts these very damaged people who do horrible things. And by the way, if you think he started this episode, they're just going to be like saying that he never did anything. But this is a man who's done fucking heinous things inside and outside of the ring. But you can do both that and also have an exaggerated cloud of exaggeration around you at the same time. So there's been a lot of intrigue, I think, in kind of teasing that apart, because I think there's a lot of folks who are finding themselves being long-term fans who hold on to a lot of these things that they heard when they were younger fans. And I'm one of those fans, by the way, folks, because New Jack's a guy that when I first was a fan, that was one of the most hush, revered and or feared names that I ever heard about. And, you know, we're talking about a guy whose main legacy is involved again with ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. But when I was growing up as a fan, New Jack was certainly a different figure than he is today, having sat down and all this research with you.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, you know, I think I mentioned before that I kind of got into wrestling around like 1998 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
You know, via my brother who had previously sworn off wrestling that it was lame, and then my brother's friends in school were like, no, check this out. Wrestling's for bad boys now.
Right.
And then it was kind of trickled down onto me as well. So I was obviously growing up on Attitude Era WWF, thought WCW was the abject worst, and I would never watch it to find out or anything like that. Just took everyone's word for it. But I get these glimpses through my brother's friend Paddy Hanna, who had the ECW tapes of this other show that was on, this other much more, honestly in their minds, better version of wrestling, because all the things that drew us to wrestling was that it was extreme, it was hardcore, it was violent, it was quote-unquote real compared to the cartoony stuff of the mid-90s. And it felt like there was always this kind of like escalation. You can listen to like the Sabu or the Raven or the Sandman episodes of this podcast and hear like similar stories of like, then I got showed a video and it's like, this is the real. But New Jack was on a level completely separate in terms of the revered nature that my brother and his friends would have. This is a guy who was like, he almost wasn't a wrestler in the sense that he was like this kind of real life gritty character from the streets, just happened to wander into the world of wrestling. Because New Jack, as long as they'd be like, hey, come up tonight, folks, don't forget the big New Jack match. New Jack appeared like the Candyman almost. Like his name would be spoken and, here he is doing a run-in, bringing out loads of weapons, hitting everyone. Then he jumps off something really high. Everyone's bleeding. Cool music is playing. And I'm like, what the hell did I just see? And that would be it. And then maybe 3 or 4 months later, I get another videotape from my brother's friend, and he'd be like, we watched another match, and the Dudley Boys are saying something horrible, and all of a sudden, oh my god, he's here, oh my god, no, he's got all these weapons, and he's jumped off something really high, oh my god. And I kind of like, I never quite understood like how someone like that got into wrestling, because I was convinced that he was not a wrestler, I guess.
Right, okay.
Because he didn't wrestle. He hit people with loads of cool weapons. The fans went crazy for him. There was a big party atmosphere, and then he usually jumped off something so high and so dangerous that I was like, just beggared belief, you know?
I'm so shocked that, because I know what a sensitive child you were.
I used to get sick if we went to the town.
And yeah, it's just, I've been surprised, I guess, every episode we've done on ECW, maybe less Tommy Dreamer, but like Sabu and even Rob Van Dam and definitely like Sandman and stuff, like how violent a lot of their matches were. And I've always found it quite shocking that little boy Kevin happily watched this stuff as like, this is cool, instead of like getting sick. And this is so much more like this makes every other guy we've done an episode on, New Jack makes every guy we've done an episode on seem like a WWF like new generation wrestler,
like a sellout, not real hardcore,
like nice and soft and gentle. And then here comes this guy. I'm amazed you didn't A, get sick, B, have nightmares, I don't know, weren't traumatized.
I think a big part of it is, you know, that you mentioned that, is always like the presentation, because all the people you're talking about, Sandman, Sabu, and New Jack here, were always, maybe Sabu less so, but generally we're good guys. And they're presented like as a triumphant, cool dude. And if they're doing something scary, it's not scary as in they're trying to scare you. They're doing something scary that it's high risk, and it's, you know, that's what I was like. That's why I loved Mick Foley so much as a kid, because he took these crazy risks. I thought it was brave. I thought it was noble. Like now that I'm older and I think about things all the time, like Jesus, imagine the legs, the knees. Oh my God! Like I didn't know what it was like to have a sore back when I was 10 years old. So I think stuff like that, even if you were a sensitive little boy like I was, very much was like, whoa, cool. And I'll tell you another big thing that was an eye opener for me. was I had that kind of image in my head of New Jack for like kind of 2 or 3 years, and then I saw the movie Beyond the Mat, where New Jack is very much used in that as a character of like, here he is, this dude who's like saying all this crazy shit you'd never hear in wrestling, doing death-defying stunts, cutting himself. He's been involved in all these scary moments and angles. He's almost went to prison for the stuff he's done in a wrestling ring. Oh, and actually, he's actually quite a sensitive man.
Yeah.
And he's got 4 justifiable homicides, but hey, he might be Denzel's friend in Hollywood. And that was always a big part of my kind of growing up as a wrestling fan, that I thought, oh, you could be this crazy thing in wrestling, but then be this like sensitive, normal soul. And not to say that took away from New Jack as like a presence or anything, but I also then like kind of took a lot of the, like throughout my teen years, I was like, oh, he can't be that bad. Because, you know, even though he has 4 justifiable homicides, Barry Blaustein in Beyond the Mat thought he was a very engaging and nice fella. And I think it was just he was fit into a role that was predetermined. They were going to tell the story about wrestlers in that movie. He slotted into that. But that was a huge thing, because I remember like my brother being like, oh shit, here comes New Jack. You know, watch out, like be careful.
Yeah.
And then after watching that movie, I'm like, oh, well, he's not Denzel, but he could be Denzel's friend. Like, you know? Thinking he was like this kind of, you know, normal dude or whatever it was. In the same way that Mick Foley and Terry Funk came across as being super hardcore, but yeah, they're just normal guys. But he's not a normal guy. I think that's very much...
Oh, he's not? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I thought that when we got into today's episode's research, that we would be spending time going through loads of court documents and testimony.
I wish.
Unraveling all of these justifiable homicides and bounty hunting records and whatnot.
I've done a bit of unraveling.
There has been unraveling, let's just say.
I've done more than most.
Yeah.
I feel there's a lot of... I don't know if it's fair to call it lazy.
I don't think it's lazy, no.
A lot of podcasters and writers who have just taken everything he said at face value. Yeah. And I think that's kind of... It's either lazy or it's cute. It's one of the other. Because I don't mind this whole thing of, like, protect kayfabe.
Of course, yeah.
Absolutely fine.
And wrestlers are going to lie and exaggerate and say their piece.
And I think as fans, that's something we should be doing, actually, in general. But I have been shocked at how little interrogation he received about a lot of the claims that he's made throughout his life.
We will get properly into it shortly, but all I can say is this. If you have listened to our Honky Tonk Man episodes, the parallels will be kind of striking in some respects about how New Jack fits what he's going to say, what he'll admit to, and what he'll claim to have done, depending on the audience in question.
Yeah.
And if you ask yourself the question, what if someone started a rumour that the Honky Tonk Man had 4 justifiable homicides? How would he handle that? Well, the answer is depending on whether or not the people interviewing him have got 2 title belts on each shoulder.
Yeah.
But I think what was perhaps less shocking and somewhat expected was that Jerome Young / New Jack, and the two are very much melded and crossed over. A fractured psyche, I think, is generous to describe it as.
I think of it a bit like Heisenberg. At what point does he become New Jacksonburg?
When's he put on that hat?
The hat, yeah, and become evil.
He's a man who wore many, many beautiful hats throughout his career, I can say, having watched a lot of New Jack footage these past few weeks. But the upbringing, this is something that's kind of not in dispute. New Jack has come, even on the grand spectrum that we have had here on How to Wrestling, of extremely fucked up childhoods, extremely fucked up upbringings. His more so than most is the understatement of the century.
I think more than anyone we've done an episode on, and that's saying something. We've had some wrestlers we've done episodes on. I know Roddy Piper had a really bad upbringing.
Yeah, I mean,
we've had even
Batista
wrestlers
had a kind of a fucked up upbringing. Like, we've had a lot of people like Matt Bourne, all that. Yeah,
we've had wrestlers like Scott Hall who've have killed people. So we've done the full spectrum of, wow, that was a shit life you had, and I'm so sorry.
And I don't think it's like a necessarily bad idea just to repeat that, even if we're explaining someone's kind of backstory and circumstances, that's not kind of an endorsement, because I do think something that's quite striking, particularly when I was looking at the tweets and whatnot, is that dark side of the ring that came out about New Jack a couple of years ago, which is one of the last pieces of content that came out before his death. That man very much double stamped, this is my version of events and how I want to be remembered in a scary kind of a way. And he very much ends that on, I had this upbringing, that's the reason, stop asking questions. Yeah. And I don't think it's as fair as just to say, oh, he had this upbringing, ergo Gypsy Joe gets stiffed and Hunter Red gets stabbed and Eric Kulas gets stabbed, and all these other terrible, horrible things happen in the ring. I don't think that's a fair thing to say, because you've mentioned a lot of really fucked up backgrounds from wrestlers there who haven't went on to, hide razor blades in their hands and matches and things like that.
No, I think with New Jack, it's a classic case of nature versus nurture.
Yeah, I think the earliest memory that he seems to have is coming from a very disruptive home and having a mother and father who were kind of battling at all times, it seems.
Yes, a lot of violence in the home, literally right away. As young as 3 to 5 years old, he's getting involved in really bad, violent fights between his parents.
Like seeing that in front of him, and I think to make a violent individual, witnessing violence before your brain has even begun to properly form.
Yeah.
There's stories of the parents getting in a fight, the mother picking him up to be taken away, the father stabs the mother 5 times in the back.
Those are two separate incidents.
There's another occasion where you're literally right in front of young Jerome. She gets stabbed by the father. She tries to leave one time, he shoots her. This is and part of that, when I was hearing it, was very much I don't know if this is naive. Obviously, it is very naive for me to be like, oh, well, if you're a young child and you see your mother get extremely physically brutalized and all this horrible, heinous violence upon you, then you're going to become that kid who's I'm going to protect mom at all costs and all that.
Oh, no.
And that is kind of almost the opposite of what happens. He has such disdain for his mother and his upbringing and the circumstances. His father dies from a heart attack when he's 5. Or is it the fact, because he's, depending on this thing as well, we've watched so many different shoots and he's so different in all of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes he is just fucked up on drugs and saying whatever it is he thinks will get a pop. There's times where he's clean, sober, somber and reflecting on it. But some of the things that don't change, regardless of his inebriation or his, escalated state of mind.
Yeah.
The stuff about the mother and the father seems to be pretty much consistent throughout, regardless.
Yeah. So, his mum was a nurse, which actually ties into one of the stories about him seeing her get stabbed. One of his earliest memories is of her getting stabbed by his dad when she's wearing her nurse's uniform, and it's white, and he just sees all the white get completely stained by all the puncture wounds of the red blood, and it just soaks through. And he's bearing in mind this happened below the age of 5.
Yeah, he's
literally
4 or something
one of the only early memories he has.
That's the type of thing you'll see every time you close your eyes when you're a child.
That's what
you're going to see that. Yeah.
But yeah, his mum was a nurse, and when his dad apparently he had a heart attack, he went to hospital, and according to his mum, she helped him get better. And by that, apparently, in his family, it's common knowledge among...
She poisoned him or something.
That she poisoned him.
Yeah.
She was a nurse, she had access to it. It's it'd be the late 60s at this point. So hospitals are not as high security as they would be now, with all the medicines behind locked cupboards and stuff
so
like that.
So you think it happened there in the hospital?
That's apparently what happened. Yeah, is that he was in hospital. He was, maybe getting better, maybe getting worse.
But you keep having episodes of How to Wrestling with killer nurses going on.
I know. And look, I'm not saying that's what happened.
No, that's just his recollection of things.
That's according to him.
And everything he says does, even if he corroborates this himself when he's in different states, probably bears an asterisk beside it as well.
But I will say, again, according to him, his mum, this is part of the reason why he doesn't like his mum. He doesn't have a good relationship with her at all. And in fact, has always said, I wish she had died instead of my dad. She was a very messy person who took out a lot of life insurance policies against loved ones.
Yeah, he has brothers who had life insurance policies taken out with them.
And then died.
And when New Jack was, getting big at ECW, doing all this death-defying stuff, she took out several life insurance policies on him.
She forged his signature.
Yeah, so
he got her reported and she almost went to jail.
It's fucking insane, man.
Because he was worried she was going to kill him.
So,
but she had a life insurance policy against the dad. He died, and then, so there's a lot of suspicions swirling around about that.
Yeah, and he tells some of the stories that he tells about growing up, it's kind of rambunctious youth, because he's like, oh yeah, we used to go robbing on the weekends, when I was in junior high and high school and all that, he was born in North Carolina, but actually grew up most of his time in Atlanta.
Yeah, he moved there when he was like 14, 15.
Not South Central LA
No.
or Harlem or whatever, because every wrestling company is like, he's from this place you associate with black culture. Yeah, well, Atlanta's pretty strongly associated with black culture, I thought. But anyway, I remember we were watching some of the stories of him being like, yeah, we go rob on the weekend. We just steal some things from the corner shop and all that. And you were like, oh, I used to get up into scrapes when I was a kid. Tell the people the scrapes that you got up to when you were a kid, Joe, growing up in South Central Cambridge.
Well, hang on, is the statute of limitations passed?
I think there has, yeah, it's true.
For stealing tractors.
Yeah, she stole a tractor, folks. Hardcore right here. And I was like, well, that's not the same thing, Joe, because you'll get chased like the hobbits at the start of Lord of the Rings. Like, you've been in Farmer Mackin's crop. Whereas him and his friends were being chased by police officers with guns who probably would have killed them had they had the opportunity. But, there's something about, and you see this in every interview that he's in, even when he's completely, out of touch with reality. He is a storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
And he has that default level of sheer charisma. And if there was a life story, a Lifetime movie to be made about New Jack, genuinely, I think a lot of the stories come from his childhood. Like him talking about the first time he robbed a store.
It's so sweet and so scary. There's so many moments in his childhood when he talks about his childhood, which I do think when he talks about that part of his life, that's when you get the most honesty from him.
Yeah, I think so, because I don't feel like he's saying a lot of that stuff to kind of puff himself up and big himself up. And I will say the kayfabe commentaries.
It's so good.
Sean Oliver, who does Kevin Nash's podcast, and I think you've went back and forth over the years with some of the content on the You Shoot stuff about.
It's so scummy.
Some of it is so scummy, but that Breaking Kayfabe series that they do, where they try and kind of talk to the wrestler kind of a little bit more to the real person. That's actually up for free on their channel, on their YouTube page, and I will put in the recommended bonus viewing. And it was probably one of the more honest glimpses of him that we got, because he did talk a lot about the kind of the childhood stuff without seemingly wanting to give you the bravado of what a badass I am, or how fucking tough I am, or how many people want to kill me, or whatever it is.
But you do occasionally get him telling stories about nice things that have happened in his childhood, because he's obviously had one of the worst upbringings you can ever fucking imagine.
The worst ones that we've seen on this show. That's saying something,
but he has had little moments of nice things happening. He was asked by Sean Oliver, did you have a teacher who you got on well with? And he mentions this teacher, Miss Mackenzie, who called him Jerry, and he got on really well with her, and she'd tell him that she loved him and she was his real mum and stuff like that. And
because he was living on his own at a certain point, from a really young age, and seeing through him. It doesn't need to be America or the UK. Everyone knows there are teachers out there. I'm a former teacher. The whole system of education in the Western world seems to only survive on people going above and beyond to make sure so many people who will fall through the cracks try and not make them fall through the cracks quite so severely, But
I think one of the few things he had in life to help him cope with everything in his head was movies. I think he's always talked about the movies he grew up watching and how much inspiration he took from them. I think that's part of the reason why he's such a good storyteller, is he loves movies so much. And the first time he ever got into armed robbery, was through watching a movie where someone did it in a movie, and he was like, I think I can do that. I think I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to go down to the shop around the corner. There, What doesn't wear a mask, just grabs a gun from his house. His mum has a little revolver and is like, I don't know what to say. Am I going to say stick him up?
Here's Limmy going what do you say when you go in here? What does he say? Is it stick him up, or give me what's it? Three guesses why I'm coming in here with the gun mouth. But he ends up robbing basically every shop in his within a 1 mile radius of his block of apartments. And of course, this is the 70s or whatever, late 70s at this point. So it's before a matter of time, it's now there's a video camera in every single shop in my neighborhood.
He's slowly noticing all the places that he's hit up and now getting security cameras in one by one. He's improving their security.
But high school for him, even though his mother moved away to New York at one point just because she had a job. So he was basically on his own, living in his house on his own, looking after himself, going to high school, was a decent student, was on did high school football and all that. But his main outlet and his main kind of joy, and the thing that puts a twinkle in his eye when he's asked about it, is, weekends, him and his friends would go robbing, and they go stealing stuff, and, buying all the latest clothes and, being the kind of the big men on the schoolyard because they had the balls and the bravado. And right before he's due to graduate, he just goes down for one of the many robberies. Now, this is one of the, there are things that he says that he went down for or was put in front of a judge for that simply did not happen.
Yeah.
But at 18 years old...
You can see his mugshot online.
Yeah, it's there.
It goes hard as hell.
18 years old, he's put straight into, like, the big adult prison, And that's kind of something that he doesn't talk a lot about, but I feel there's a you grow up quick and you grow up fast type of element if you're to survive 3 years or so in prison when you're a kid, basically.
Well, especially because, as far as I know, he got put in adult prison before they get a bit... This happened to a cousin of mine. When you're about the age of 17 and you go to prison, you can either go to like the kind of the youth prison or the adult prison. It depends on the type of crime, depends on if they're going to go hard on you or not.
Armed robbery, you're probably going to end up into the latter and not the former.
So he ends up going to adult prison. So he's surrounded by people who are a lot older than him, at quite a formative age. I think that does, he's already grown up so fast, but then he's put into this situation where he's among like hardened criminals, not just like juvie.
And I think there's a lot of that kind of, at that point in prison, it's like, he has explained this and it's been kind of teased out with him in a lot of these interviews of like, well, when you're in prison, do you get in a gang? Do you? And he's like, no, but you kind of have to start fights all the time and be unpredictable and all that stuff. And I think that's something that is kind of a foundational block of Jerome Young / New Jack is unpredictable violence is kind of like a safety net almost for him. Whereas if you can't see where I'm coming from and you're under the threat that I might be violent at any given time, no one can fuck with me. And again, I'm not trying to say that in itself lies an explanation for some of the, frankly, inexplicable things that he's done.
Well, because he's also said in other interviews he didn't have to do any of that stuff, and he just did it because he was in prison and he was frustrated and he was bored.
If you have anything on the record of New Jack saying, this is why I did something, or this is what I did, I guarantee you there's going to be an interview of him wearing a different hat, seeming either way more sober or way more fucked up on drugs or way more drunk, saying, no, not that, the opposite of that. And he has, in my mind, like, never mind Jake Roberts, like, in terms of like a slippery customer trying to pin him down, but I think when there are some consistencies, I think it's fair to share them so you yourself can start to... Because I'll be honest with you folks, I don't know really what I think about him at this point in time. He's one of the only times we've done an episode where the more I've learned about him, the more it's just chipped away what I thought I knew about him. And I think it's just fair to bring up a lot of these points because from the response that we got on the tweets and on the Patreon, etc., people were so like, bam, he is this one thing. And a lot of it was good, and probably slightly more of it was bad. But people seem so sure of their opinion of him that I think there's enough out there to maybe shake you either way.
I think that's what he wants people to.
And I think so,
he wants people to have strong opinions on him.
He accomplished that in life and in death, So coming out of prison is where we then get the part of New Jack that made me, as a kid, just think this guy is so fucking cool. Because like I mentioned, beyond the mat, obviously, it's like, oh, he's kind of a normal guy. He's maybe not as crazy as the character is. But they were like, he's a normal guy with 4 justifiable homicides. Now, for me as a kid who had his boss, Boba Fett, IG-88, and Dengar figures all lined up and just hoping they're going to drop 4 Lum and Zukas any day of the week, the phrase bounty hunter was literally the coolest fucking thing you could put in front of me.
So he didn't get into it straight away, actually, which I thought was interesting, given because in your head it makes more sense for him to come out of prison and become a bounty hunter.
Yeah, that's what you do, right? You've learned the skills inside, now you're going to ply your trade and become a cool bounty hunter.
Yeah, it's a nice, clean narrative. But no, he came out of prison and he went to college.
That's such like a...
It goes against kind of
goes against the narrative of what New Jack is.
But he went to college and he did college football. And he was a defensive backer, which apparently is, I don't know anything about American football, so forgive me if this is incorrect, but apparently that's a position where it helps if you know how to fight.
And run.
And run, definitely.
Very, very good at both of those things.
And apparently he was really good. He was one hell of a football player, according to his teammates. And he decided to try out to go pro. And he was at a tryout for the Atlanta Falcons, which even I know is a big fucking deal.
The Atlanta Falcons.
At the tryout, he broke his ankle. And he was like, well, fuck that.
Wow, far be it from me to be disappointed in like the most unique wrestler ever. But he's a former football player who didn't make the big leagues and then plied his trade in the great sport of professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. Hey, JR, I got a new signee for you. He's big and he plays football.
So he becomes a truck driver for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then actually it was one of his former college teammates, a guy called Mike Wilson, he ran the Atlanta PD fugitive squad.
Right, and that's kind of like bail bondsmen and stuff like that.
It's different. So the fugitive squad is for the police.
Right.
And then the bail bondsmen, they do fugitive retrieval as well, but they do it at the same time as doing bail bondsman retrieval, which is like, so basically you bring in either the person in question, the fugitive, or you bring in the money for the bail.
Right, and then you get like a percentage.
You get... New Jack says it's 20%.
He said 10 and 20% in the same interview once.
Yeah,
so,
I haven't verified this. I don't know. You get a percentage.
But he's like not the man who set up the office. He's kind of like freelancing
yeah, he's a freelancer.
And this is in the Atlanta area as well still. Yeah, okay.
Now, I know what some people may be thinking. Hey, he's a felon. How could he have done that given that he has a criminal record? Because these days, if you're a bounty hunter... You have to go through criminal background checks.
Health and safety training.
Yeah, literally, like, all that shit. You
have to carry a hot liquid while pursuing a perp.
It's a hard industry to just get into.
Yeah.
But because this was the 80s...
A little bit more loose.
A lot more loose.
Pre-Dog the Bounty Hunter. This is pre-Steve Blackman and Dr. D, Dave Schultz coming in and locking up that bounty hunting business. So I'm assuming, Joe... Given, I mean, I don't want to apologize as well because I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Joe's going to get a look at four homicide cases put in front of a judge and a jury who are going to determine that for the extenuating circumstances of the badass nature of the bounty hunting, that these homicides were in fact justifiable. And like, I think literally, like, we just typed in like New Jack homicide and it's him sent and go, no, I never did that. No, never did that. And much like R-Truth fighting John Cena in an airport, it's literally just something that someone said on his behalf in wrestling.
That's what he
says. That then grew off into this other thing. Now, did you find out any more about it?
Well, okay, but he says in that video, oh, that was just a rumour started by someone else, and I've never said that myself. He has.
Okay, you did say that.
He said it loads of times. I found like 10 videos of him being like, yeah, I killed 4 people. Justifiable homicide.
The one always gets me when someone's like, of course, Jack, you've got 3 No, 4. Don't take away my accredited justifiable homicides.
I had to do a bit of research into what on earth justifiable homicide even means.
I mean, justifiable homicide is, I'm assuming, it's a case where, like, it's manslaughter, but they have determined, I mean, this is going to vary from state to state, because, like, you know, this could be, say, Florida, for instance, has stand your ground.
Yeah.
If maybe someone was like, I'm coming to get you, and like they're knocking down your door or whatever it is, and they've got cause to concern that they're going to enter into the home or you can see a weapon or whatever it is, and then you discharge your firearm, that could be classed as a justifiable homicide. I think, for instance, like Scott Hall, like when he was, you know, he was in a physical struggle with a guy who had produced the gun and then the gun was discharged and he died.
Yeah.
I don't think that gets counted as justifiable homicide. That's still down as manslaughter. And you know.
I think so, because it was an accident.
Yeah.
Justifiable homicide, and I'm generalising here.
And it'll vary from state to state and country to country, yeah.
It's generally used in cases of like self-defense.
Right.
If there's no other alternative, you have to end the fight or else you will die.
And I would assume it's something that would probably be used as well in like things like, you know, if you're, I don't know, a licensed bounty hunter or law enforcement or, you know, a ranger or whatever it may be, where like you are someone who is expected to discharge their gun over the course of duty, they even get stamped as, oh, that one is justifiable, you're fine.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because you mentioned guns. He has a felony.
So he can't have a gun.
He cannot legally own a gun. So if there was any incident of him killing someone with a gun, justifiably or otherwise, there would be a criminal record. He would have to go to jail for that alone.
Right.
There are no incidences of that. So if this had happened, he was not using a gun, which is insane. So come on, get real. But even still, he's kind of hoist by his own petard with his own legend here, because if he'd said, "Oh, I have 4 homicides under my belt and I was never caught," then fair enough.
Okay, that actually, Joe, I'm going to say that's cooler than
It's
a judge
pretty
being
cool.
like, "Jerome, good job on the justifiable homicide. We'll see you next week."
I don't know if that's part of the image he wanted, though, because that would make it imply it's more kind of like, I don't know, street crime.
There's times where it feels like over the years he's been like, you know what? Time to clean up the image.
Yeah.
This whole thing, if you search for New Jack and all this like wrestlers who've murdered people stuff comes up, maybe I should get rid of that. That doesn't work for me. And there's other times where he's like, you know what? Maybe this thing is actually my best shot of immortality in my legend. So, you know, because there's a video of him from like, it's right before the Dark Side of the Ring comes out, and he's in his fucking Sunday best, and he's like, no, the craziest thing that ever happened to me when I was a bounty hunter was like, someone drove their car into me once.
Yeah.
Like, downplaying it so much that it shouldn't even be on his Wikipedia page. And then, like, in that Dark Side of the Ring from 2022, he's like, and if I could have done the 5th one,
Yeah.
And it feels like they don't want to, the makers of that doc didn't want to engage with some of those falsehoods. Because they're like, allegedly, he says he does. But it's like, you have him there, and he's drunk on this interview. Do you want to ask him? Or does that take away from the real, like, dark nature of what this real insane character? Because he, in that, right, that's before Dark Side of the Ring is like widespread and known what the vibe is and what kind of shows they're going to do. And I like that show a lot, by the way, I will say. But I think there's a guy on that who's very much like the Jake Robertson Beyond the Mat is. He thinks it's this like one thing, and then they give him enough footage to make it into this other thing.
I wonder if part of it is if they asked him about it and he said, 4 justifiable homicides, they'd have to verify that.
Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of journalistic integrity involved in the Dark Side of the Ring. There are journalists, I think, involved in the
But
production.
if you kind of sidestep and say like, oh, there's claims made about him, who
then
knows?
they don't need to verify it.
But it's so verifiable, it's ridiculous.
Well, that's the thing, because he said they were justifiable homicides, that's a legal ruling.
Yeah.
That would have had to go, there'd be police records, there'd be court documents, there'd be lots of paperwork to say that not only he killed someone, but that it was found justifiable 4 times.
Surprisingly, there is like a fair bit of paperwork involved if you want to say this murder was okay, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just be like, oh yeah, don't worry, me and the judge shook hands or whatever. It's not New Jack City, New Jack. It's not that corrupt a system.
And I managed to find... It was really difficult to actually find, and I'm really amazed I even came across it because it doesn't show up on Google.
Was it on the Honky Tonk Man's website on the way back machine by any chance? He has fucking 4 justifiable homicides.
No, I found on this quite small local website for Atlanta news, and it's for like alternative Atlanta news.
Right.
It's called Creative Loafing, and there was an interview between an actual journalist and New Jack, and in it the journalist actually asks him about, the journalist isn't a wrestling fan, they want to know about the homicides and things like that, and they actually contact the Atlanta police and ask for any criminal records, any court documents, anything like that. There are none. So we can, I think, pretty safely say that the justifiable homicides claim isn't true.
Yeah, because Jerome Young never committed 4 justifiable homicides. But New Jack, the kayfabe wrestling character, and that's the thing, is like, and there's so many people, and I'm one of them, who kind of failed to realize this guy, like, he knows he is a wrestler.
Yeah.
He knows, like, he talks in Beyond the Mat and extensively elsewhere about the New Jack character, creating the persona and the character. And yeah, the New Jack character who claims to be from South Central LA, who isn't, Jerome Young, yeah, maybe he does have justifiable homicides because Kevin Sullivan wasn't actually a devil worshipper, or these random, Wayne Ferris isn't actually an Elvis impersonator. Like, I think sometimes we do forget when the similarities between the horrible actions of a real life person and then the kind of, hey, this is good for a kayfabe version of an exaggerated version. Like, he's still, and that's the thing is, I think he should be allowed, his legend is the character, the fake New Jack kayfabe character. Yeah, he's got 4 justifiable homicides. That's cool. That's part of the...
Yeah.
But it is a character. And maybe he even forgot that a lot of his life. But I think us as wrestling fans can actually perhaps discern between the two things. Because I think that in his pursuit of trying to constantly juggle the ball and throw up a smokescreen of, is it real, is it not, who can say, and all that, it's like, because it's so easily provable.
And yet, no one else... That journalist, that tiny little interview I found that no one's really come across, that was the only instance of anyone even trying to prove, which I find, that's the thing where it's like, is it lazy? Is it cute? Is it people taking him at his word because they'd like to believe it's true? Or is it people who can't really be bothered to do the legwork? And like, is it because wrestling is just one of those industries where journalists tend to spend their time doing different things than verifying information?
I just think the power of being a charismatic sort, because I spent most of this morning went down a rabbit hole about Cody Rhodes's Cody Lies, and a charming man who tells a lie and he says it often enough and he says it with with conviction. And then people being like, wow, like fans just being like, wow. And like side by side, the people being shown the video of that thing he's saying is completely not true. And them still being like, yeah, but the guy whose job it is to deceive me and be entertaining while he does it, maybe I might actually believe him anyway, in spite of all this obvious evidence. So yeah, I think it's fairly open and shut. But that's not to say that and again, I talk about making a movie of the man's life.
Oh yeah, you'd include the 4 justifiable homicides, right? If we're going full kayfabe.
But like, if you're not going full kayfabe, there's all these, like, you showed me all these wacky stories of like crazy shit that happened. Because being a bail bondsman in the 1980s, surprisingly, like, is fairly wild shit.
I mean, again, I don't know how many of those stories are true or exaggerated. Like, everything he tells, though, in terms of the stories that you're thinking of here, like the little old lady he chases across the country.
She goes through all these different states. She hides in the attic in one place. She finally catches her, and she's singing like Bible songs in the back as he drives her like 16 hours back to Atlanta.
Yeah, well, he buys her a Big Mac. He tells these stories so wonderfully.
Yeah,
it is like each one could be its own little movie, and yeah, even still, it's just like, well, did that happen that way, or is it tweaked a little bit to make it sound, more interesting or more funny?
Because he does have an insane way with words. We're going to talk now a little about him getting into wrestling proper. His debut starts around 1992. There's a local wrestler in Atlanta called Ray Candy who trains him because he's shown an interest in that. It was very hard to find out, with New Jack, like, hey, were you a fan growing up? Did you watch much? Quite coy about that.
He has said on a number of interviews that he did not watch wrestling growing up. According to apparently other people,
I'm putting a slightly skeptical smiley face right now, folks. Sorry, I
can't remember what it was. I did come across something from a childhood friend of his or something who was like, "Oh no, he loved wrestling."
Because he is simultaneously like almost not a wrestler at all from that early image that I had of him. But my God, you want to talk about a guy who hits the ground running on, like, if you list the 10 most important things about being a wrestler, he's got 6 of them figured out before he even he's out of training. We actually found like one of his earliest on-screen appearances. This is from down in Memphis, USWA, like 92, 93. So fresh out of training as a good guy, would you believe? And he is, from the word dot, he is New Jack. He's got the look down, the kind of the torn t-shirt with the singlet underneath, with the kind of the combat pants, with the laced up boots. And a lot of the kind of the vibe and the look and the inspiration comes from a famous movie that came out in 1991, which we watched the other night, New Jack City.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Recommend it, definitely.
Fucking great. Love New Jack. Like, honestly, if you want yourself a good crime thriller with some over-the-top, insane 90s action, Wesley Snipes sitting on a fucking vampire's throne while he sells crack cocaine to kids.
Super villain of drugs.
Chris Rock, amazing in that. Has a great turn in that movie. Like, really, really fun, hour 40 minutes of your time.
Banging soundtrack.
Hell of a great soundtrack. And it's funny because I remember always seeing that video in Extravision back in Mullingar and be like, New Jack City, sure. I bet that movie came around and was inspired by New Jack.
Was inspired by New Jack?
Yeah, because he was a cool gangster, so I'm assuming, obviously, and this is in my mind, it would only make sense that they would watch ECW and steal steal our ideas. Hollywood, when the time machine went back.
And that's what happened with GTA as well. Can't believe they all stole it from New Jack.
Paul Heyman, I know that you have got infinite sacks of guilt deep down about your exploitation of New Jack over the years. But all of your posthumous, he's the reason Grand Theft Auto Vice City stories exist.
Sure.
Bullshit sounds so weird. And those Gen Z people who you're paying a lion's share of salary back in New York to tell you things young people believe.
Yep.
it makes you seem like such a fucking gobshite skeleton of a boomer
also,
to say New Jack created Grand Theft Auto.
The fact that he waited until after he died to say that shit, because I've read so many interviews with New Jack now, and Paul Heyman comes up in every single one of them.
He never has a good thing to say.
He fucking hates him.
But Joe, I want you to do this. Gangsta style.
He says in one interview he'd like to run Paul Heyman over with a lawnmower, which is a great threat.
And of course, they added that into Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
But then they took it out because they were scared of New Jack. Now, here's the thing I want to mention about New Jack City and New Jack. And I think New Jack, in terms of innovation in wrestling, because you see him when he shows up in this USWA clip, and like he dresses like no one else in wrestling.
Yeah.
He has an authenticity about him just from the way he speaks, and just from the fact that he's a black man in wrestling, which is kind of, even as the years went on, like slightly there was a lot less black people in wrestling than there were white people in wrestling, And I think what he is, and from watching New Jack City, is he's very much a conduit of the times. And I think in wrestling, being an innovator, it's almost as good to come up with something new as it is to be able to grab the tethers of all different parts of culture and be that kind of conduit of hip-hop culture or gangster rap or, crime movies and TV shows and stand-up comedy, Def Jam, all that type of stuff all coming together. And pre-internet, that makes you a visionary. Yeah. That makes you an innovator.
Well, that's actually what New Jack means in the context of New Jack City. It means a new generation, a new style, and a new kind of criminal.
And that's why after watching New Jack City, Joe and I's new favorite type of music, sorry, move over Vaporwave and Japanese city pop. We're into New Jack Swing now, folks.
Yeah.
You'll find us listening to men crooning over a burning garbage can. Great stuff. But yeah, he is like New Jack from the word go. Yes. Although what's really weird in USWA is he's a good guy.
He's nice.
Coming out like high-fiving people and all that.
And he wrestles.
Yeah, he can wrestle.
He actually can wrestle. And he wrestles pretty good.
So he is probably the only wrestler we've ever seen where every iteration, like, you could plot a graph. The earliest we saw him wrestle was 1992. The last match I think we saw of his would have been from like 2003 or 4. And I swear to God, it's like decrease, like wrestling. Not to say he has no skills, but it's like what he does.
Yeah.
Because this guy's throwing belly to bellies and gut wrenches and beautiful suplexes.
And he's already so good on the mic. It's really frustrating because if he'd applied himself instead, he genuinely would be, I think, one of the best wrestlers who had ever lived. Like, he started off with such an advantage, considering he got into it in his 30s.
Yeah, he was 30 when he actually started training, which is madness.
Like, he already
That's
has...
DDP old. That's Batista old.
Yeah, to have the name, the look, the mic skills alone when you go straight in is insane.
The uniqueness as well, the authenticity, yeah.
The skill in ring and the strength. He does a lot of like power bombs and stuff like that. Suplexes. He's a strong guy.
I was shocked to see him as a good guy, particularly in USWA, which is down in Memphis, because he has spoken a lot, and is probably was the most outspoken people I could ever think of talking about like racism in wrestling that he experienced, because obviously a lot of the places where he wrestled, particularly starting off, it was kind of down south. But I think it's easy to forget, and I think he even did as well, talking about I'm not going to go to Memphis like in his later career because like, that place is fucking horrible. Like they had such a huge black audience, and like seeing like a huge black audience there to see New Jack at those Memphis tapings. So he has like a strong connection with that crowd and that fan base. But I think he's also spoken about the difficulty of being authentic in a world of wrestling at the time where it's like the early 90s and a lot of men in their like 50s and 60s, white lads are telling you what to be.
Yeah.
And he has a lot of disdain for his black peers, and he's always very diplomatic not to name names necessarily. But he's like, if you want to be black in wrestling at the time, you have to play a certain game.
Yeah.
Because you're so fewer opportunities that if you messed up, someone who's like racist or whatever who's in charge is like, I told you that was going to happen with this guy. So you're kind of having to work twice as hard. And he's like, then there's people who, instead of just getting on with it, are so worried about their job that they suck up, or they try overly to placate the bookers or the promoters or whatever it is because they're so scared of their job, and then they end up kind of coming out to get you. So some of the people he speaks least fondly of in wrestling are his black peers in wrestling. So it's a kind of a really like... It's kind of miserable, I guess, because I see what you're saying about in terms of like he has all this upside and potential.
He has so much more of advantage than like a lot of other people at that time.
But when you say like kind of, oh, if he only applied himself, I would counter and say it's very difficult to apply and to be that type of character when everything is almost pushing against that and wanting to exploit that, I think. Because, you know, they have him out there with kind of the fun hip-hop music. One of the first things they do in USWA is pair him with, like, some do-nothing white lad and call the white guy Homeboy. And his whole thing is that he's coming out and he's shucking and jiving. And it's always a little bit cringe, I guess.
Definitely. But he also has the advantage in that he has his principles right from the get-go. Because he's that bit older, he's not naive when he comes into the industry thinking, oh, gee, shucks, maybe these people won't take advantage. He knows they're going to take advantage of him every step of the way if they possibly can.
It's sad, I guess, because when you see someone who has correctly identified how the deck is stacked against him, but he then acts kind of so defensively and so paranoid about his position. And again, like, you don't kind of blame him in that respect. But, like, even as he becomes a bigger and bigger star, I think he starts to almost kind of... That's when he becomes so uncooperative and so hard to work with, it feels.
I think the worst thing that ever happened to his career was something his trainer Ray Candy said to him when he was starting out, which was, you have to do things in your career that you've never seen before. And on paper, it's good advice.
But he's probably saying, like, you know, maybe you do a side headlock takeover outside of the ring.
What he means is not how that was taken from someone like New Jack, who has seen some... Yeah. Like, Ray Candy hasn't seen what New Jack has seen. New Jack has already seen things that no person should ever see.
Yeah, and also as well, look at the period of time when New Jack's active in wrestling, like 93 to, like, 2005.
Yeah.
Like, wrestling from even though there's as much time from 2005 to now, I can throw on some... We used to do it all the time in Pay-Per-View Classic. We'll see a show from 2005. You can see so many of the building blocks from there. But compare that 2005 show to a show from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Wrestling is still, like, this really old-feeling thing, and it's so far removed. Yeah. Those 20 years, because of the lack of internet and, you know, the speed of light exchange of information... a much slower, gradual, you know, and the change that he sees becomes kind of exponential, I guess, during that kind of period that he's there in wrestling.
Well, as well, wrestling is so dated. It's always behind the times. In every aspect of culture, wrestling never leads, it just follows.
Yeah.
He already feels like, right when he starts off in USWA, he seems so fresh.
Yes.
And so... It kind of, it's jarring because it's like, Jesus, he seems so modern. But it's not.
What's he doing here?
It's not even that he's modern, it's that wrestling is so fucking slow.
That's it, yeah, you're 100% right there, yeah. And after this, like, short tenure in USWA, he, you know, bounced around a few of the little territories. I think it's in Georgia where he is, where, again, you know, another old school down south territory, but he meets a man by the name of Mr. Mustafa Saeed, and they form a tag team. And that tag team is one of the most endearing parts of his legacy. And I want to say, Mustafa was always a guy, like, when I would be watching my ECW tapes back in the day, I'd be like, cool, like, this kind of weird fucking looking big hench guy behind New Jack, looking kind of crazy. And as confused as I am about where I stand with New Jack after all this research, there's one unimpeachable truth I hold dear in my heart now, Joe. I fucking love Mustafa.
He's great.
Describe Mustafa for the layperson who's maybe not seen this crazy-eyed individual.
Yeah, I mean, he's got crazy eyes for sure. I don't know how to describe him other than, okay, so he's huge. He's absolutely massive. I don't know how tall he is, but he seems like 6'4" or something like that.
He's fucking hench.
He's a big boy. And he's always picking his nose.
Yeah, he's a weird dude.
Pulling strange faces into the camera and, like, flexing and strutting his head a lot.
Yeah, he's, like, kind of, like, very much, like, got that kind of sheepherder's energy of, like, he's always been kind of, like, doing something weird with his body. And New Jack, of course, he's the mouthpiece, always doing the promos. And then in the background, you've got Mustafa gurning, doing his stuff, basically. Yeah. Very much once they get into the tag team, it's clear that New Jack's like, okay, I'm going to handle the talking and maybe you do a little bit more of the wrestling. And I think very much it's apparent that New Jack's kind of bread and butter is the charisma, the promo work and all that. But I think as well it's worth bearing in mind, like, when they did the Dark Side of the Ring, they're like, Mustafa's fucking crazy. I'm like, I knew it. He is, isn't he? And they're like, he'd like fucking pick shit up off the ground and smoke him. He's all he would smoke.
Not actual shit,
No,
just to be clear. Like
pencil shavings,
yeah.
right? You know, he'd get bananas and hang them up until they go all dry and then scoop them out. Right? I was telling Joe that when I was in boarding school, they have like every single boy would go through the same phase. They'd hang up their banana peels, talk about how fucking high they're going to get. Then the flies would come. Then they'd forget about them. And then they'd get this like black crisp that they'd sheepishly put in the bin when they realised they have none of the paraphernalia required to smoke this thing. So I was expecting maybe Mustafa's like fallen off the face of the earth, inscrutable individual.
Let's see what he's been up to.
He's just like, he's the
Normal
most normal, well-adjusted seaman man in the
Hello.
world. A big happy head on him. And I was actually quite happy to find out that he's probably another element of the gangster's mythos that's kind of been a little bit egged on.
Maybe he was crazy. And
He had his
down.
wild youth.
It's hard to know. There's not much out there about him.
But the gangsters kind of hit their stride together. Like, it feels like the actor's a lot better than maybe Good Guy New Jack and Homeboy. But it's Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which was almost like an analog in many ways of ECW. If ECW was the division of the booker Paul E. Dangerously / Paul Heyman, which was leading the way of changing wrestling with the kind of the new movement of grunge and being on the finger of the pulse of what was modern and new, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was looking at the way that wrestling had maybe lost its way and needed to go back to its roots. It was very much the old school, old style, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We need to get away from the cartooniness of what WWF and WCW are doing and give you that old kind of good guys with passion and love and nasty bad guys. And it was very interesting to watch these two very divergent fringe promotions have very different ideas of what wrestling should be. And both had some triumphs. I think ECW hit into the legacy a lot more and is remembered more fondly because of how ahead of its time it was. And I think a throwback from the mid-90s is never going to be remembered as fondly. But Smoky Mountain was very, very important for a lot of wrestlers.
Yeah.
And I had heard, I can't remember where it was, some book or another I had read where like, oh yeah, New Jack came up through Smoky Mountain. I was like, what? New Jack in the kind of this is the place where Mick Foley went to kind of have an easy time talking about his fists being like Cheetos, Mr. Candido. Kind of a silly place. So I assumed always, back when I was a teen or a young wrestling fan, that Smoky Mountain Wrestling New Jack, where he was a heel with the gangsters, is probably like, hey everybody, we're gonna listen to our loud music.
Boo.
And I don't care, I don't think that Billy Ray Cyrus is that good after all. He can't say that. My God, folks, stop what you're doing right now. Head on over to that youtube.com because the entire run of the gangsters in Smoky Mountain Wrestling is available. We've watched it all. And it is fucking wild.
Great.
This is some of my favorite wrestling I have ever seen in my life, Joe.
Well, is it the wrestling, really? Or is it these promos?
The promos, the angles, everything about this. This is an absolute madness. The fact that this happened in a company that was trying to do something a little bit, good guys and bad guys. I wear a nice white hat, I'm the good guy. You wear the black hat, you're the bad guy. Jesus Christ, they dialed up to 11.
Oh, yeah.
Cornette was worrying that their attendance was going down and they weren't getting enough heat anymore. So they wanted to bring in something that was maybe a little bit more contemporary. He'd heard about New Jack and Mustafa and he's like, hey, you want to come in, work heel here. And this wasn't New Jack being like, I know, I'll do this, I'll do...
Yeah.
This is very much kind of feels like Cornette was kind of pushing them in a certain direction.
Yeah, he basically said, look, I want you to come in and I want you to rile up the white audience as much as possible. I want you to say things that you would never normally say. I want you to piss them off. Think of the worst things you can think of to say.
This is 1994, so you were talking about in the wake of the Rodney King murder, you're talking about the LA riots, OJ Simpson trial. This is kind of like an ultimate flashpoint for race relations.
Yeah.
In America, where a lot of people perhaps all at once realized that things were maybe not as copacetic as their naivety or ignorance would have them believe.
Yeah.
So to put it in perspective where they are, you're talking the Smoky Mountain territory, Kentucky, you're talking like Tennessee, like a bit of Arkansas, like you're quite down south, quite down Bible Belt area,
Yeah.
where people were used to seeing at these wrestling shows, if there's a black character, they're a bad guy usually to begin with. You didn't really have kind of heroic, noble black characters. You didn't really have that many black characters to begin with. Now, we've gotten some correspondence and posts, etc. from we'll read out in the tweet section later on from people who actually grew up in this area and
Wow,
who have a bit more kind of first-hand knowledge of how brazen this was.
Because I think that's key to understanding.
Because people hear this now and they're like, awesome, this is cool. And I get you, because a lot of the stuff I've watched, I'm like, this is fucking awesome. This is very entertaining. I think one of the things that's kind of really satisfying about watching the Gangsters promos in Smoky Mountain is, obviously, what they say is still very much shocking and all that, and it's extra shocking because it's happening in a wrestling environment. It's also happening in like a very old school, dusty old, Jim Cornette's vision of mid-90s wrestling. It's a throwback. It feels like it's almost like it's a simulation and not real. But I guess something about it that's kind of like really entertaining for me at the very least. Because I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who see this and like, fuck yeah, like this is awesome. Because in my viewpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's something about seeing people, and I'm not just saying like, there's a bunch of racists, and seeing them be like, what? That's obviously very entertaining. But seeing a lot of people's very narrow, shallow worldview get so eloquently challenged.
Yeah.
Because it's not as if New Jack's there being like, blah, 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 blah. OJ, like, he is so fucking eloquent, but so furious.
Yeah.
There's a rage, there's an energy. It's so charismatic. It's so engaging. The man, like, you can literally see the announcers watching him. Like, JR is there with a microphone being like, fucking, like, just seeing in real time people being like, well, I don't know if I can debate you on that, Mr. Jack. Like, just seeing it so eloquently put, it is so fucking good. And so many times where I'm like, I think I've heard it all now. He said, like, he's turned to Jim Cornette and he says, you're not going to manage me because, he invokes, like, slave ships and slave owners and no one's going to own it. Like, nah, and then there's, like, a promo where he's like, Martin Luther King says to turn the other cheek. If you turn the other cheek, I'll shoot you. Like, fucking hell, man. But I think the one that most people have probably seen is the O.J. Simpson promo.
It's the O.J. one, yeah. He says, shout out to O.J. Simpson, 2 less we got to worry about.
I mean, mamma mia. But, like, people were like, you see people in these segments and matches.
They're horrified.
They're horrified, and it's not just it's not just the white folks. He got a huge controversy with the NAACP, which was very much, apparently at the time, we looked a little bit into this, but they had a lot of their own controversies going on, that kind of local chapter or wherever it was. But a big issue with them was kind of like, they had their own kind of controversy, so they almost piggybacked off this show that's going out on TV, and this guy is, this terrible representation of black people. So they started picketing his shows. So it was actually black people who were picketing, apparently, these Smoky Mountain shows.
Okay, to be fair, though, because I think it's easy to see this in kind of 2 different ways here, which is one, there's just decent white people here, and then he comes in and he says these things that upset race relations. I don't think it's as straightforward as that. I think, unfortunately, where they are and the time that they're in, and the narrative in wrestling altogether, which is, as we said earlier, it's like, black person, boo.
Yeah, you're putting a pressure cooker on the fucking stove at 100%.
You have a lot of white people here who are racist. You have members of the KKK probably in the audience, if not, attending as police.
Oh, I mean, like, there's a match we're about to do in a second, which actually comes from the Wrestling Gold collection, which we've talked about on our Patreon page, which is some classic wrestling matches with new commentary put over by at one time lifelong friends Dave Meltzer and Jim Cornette, and without a drop of irony or kind of, could you believe this, in his voice, Jim Cornette is like, well, one of the big problems, Dave, with the Gangsters is that they come in and all of a sudden, a lot of people who would sponsor the show, like, they were Klansmen, and they own local businesses, they were firemen, they were doctors, they were our neighbors, and they wouldn't come to the shows anymore, and they wouldn't buy the seats anymore, and they wouldn't hang their banners from the rafters because the Gangsters kind of stirred things up so much.
Hey, Jim, maybe you don't need to worry about getting money from the Klansmen, eh? You can maybe find a different audience.
Why don't you just use organised crime to fund your organisation instead? Hey, why don't you just use the Saudi government? That's kind of like, if it's race to the bottom of you guys, come on, like, we can debate this.
But I think there's a lot of white people in attendance who were so desperate to say the N-word at a black guy.
And boy, did they.
Yeah, Jim Cornette, he wanted their money and he got it through the gangsters. And it's like, that's why I feel like a bit complicated about this run. I don't feel complicated about New Jack's promos. I think they're fucking awesome.
They are genuinely like...
They're so funny.
So, some of the best promos, and I'm saying this as well, like outside of Smoky Mountain, once we get into ECW as well, I have been thinking about his promos for like a month, it feels like.
They're so good.
He is, I think, genuinely, and he doesn't get talked about this, he's a top 5
all-time
promo for me.
He's so good.
Because people are kind of like, oh yeah, because you said the funny OJ thing. Like, no, seriously, like...
All of them are great.
All of them. The man is compelling when he talks.
He's iconic. But yeah, I just don't think... I think it's irresponsible for a promoter, and I say this knowing full well how irresponsible promoters as a beast are.
Fuck the bosses.
But like, to go and like put a black man in that situation and prod him a few times and be like, right, I want you to piss off actual Klansmen who will kill you if they get the opportunity. Well, like, let's not beat around the bush here.
They had to have like police escorts to and from the building.
Yeah, but like, do you trust them?
I know, right?
He's just said that the police are Klansmen too.
Yeah,
like,
New Jack's told the story like several times. Like, just talk about how like embedded the racism was. Like, there was a kid who was like, I'm a big fan, like, I love you, like, I'm a big fan of yours, and then he rubs his hand on him and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, oh, my dad says if I touch a black person it'll rub off and I'll turn black. And that's what's so fucking dispiriting about it, was that, you know, they were really riling that up. Exactly.
And I think, you know, that's obviously not good for the white kids who are being taught to be just extremely racist, but I think it's even more damaging, obviously, for someone like in New Jack's position there, where he's being told, hey, if you want to get paid, you have to be called the N-word. Night in, night out, by people who want to kill you.
Yeah, they're not saying that with any tint of irony in their voice. Like, you know, they're saying that with like, and we watch so many
people in powerful positions who have the ability to make things happen. It's
stuff like
fucking scary.
It's saying like he'd go to the arena and they wouldn't, like, you know, people wouldn't sell him a drink because alcohol makes black people violent, and you know, it's weird. Like, it's just like
the full spectrum
at every level
of racism.
New Jack feels like, and he wants you to believe this all the time, that he's 10 foot tall and made of, you know, fire-breathing dragon material and all that jazz. But it was actually in the dark side of the ring where they talked to D'Lo Brown, who, as Downtown D'Lo Brown, he actually got his first start in the wrestling business, being basically like the stooge for the gangsters. He'd eat the pinfalls, he'd get beaten up and all that. And he was like, you know, very, very, like, torn up about it, kind of in his... I fucking love D'Lo. There's a reason why we inexplicably did a D'Lo Brown episode way earlier.
Really early.
Everyone's like, why are you doing that? Go, shut up. My podcast. I do what I want.
I don't think I've seen him since, up until this episode.
But D'Lo was kind of like, you know, you're taught when you're training, and he was just out of training, like, you know, you want heat no matter what, but he's like... It took its toll on you. Like,
of course it
does. He's like, you know, years later, you're kind of sitting there going, like, everyone's calling it, you know, like, you absorbed so much racial abuse.
And then as well, it's like, I'm playing the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I need
that, yeah.
the booze. I need the N-words being thrown at me.
And I think what you've stumbled upon there is one of the most fucked up kind of byproducts of the old school mentality of wrestling. And the thing as well is, it didn't help Smoky Mountain. Ultimately.
No, that's the thing.
Because it was so controversial. Yeah. It kind of drove people away.
It drove away the Klansmen.
Because the people were like, oh, I'm uncomfortable coming here and stuff like that. And I think, like, if you were a black fan, you might... I don't know how you'd feel about that. It's very difficult to assume... Lots of people would not go for very different reasons, I think.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who were going were people because, like, those fucking bad... They're going to be on the show tonight. Like, let's round up a posse and go to the show. There was a lot of trouble. They'd have shit thrown at them, batteries thrown at them.
Like actual bags of shit,
they had to come to the ring, like, with a tarp over their heads. Yeah. And it didn't make them fucking slow down, you know? No. But there's a lot of, like, of the material that's up on YouTube that I just compel you to watch because of how fucking shocking it is, how, like, just hitting the nerves straight away. The same thing that you don't think is going to be said. It is, like, pure fire and magic. And it is kind of complicated, I guess, because it's not like New Jack came in and is like, you know what, Jim, I've got a crazy idea for this angle. It's Jim Cornette being like, well, you know, fucking everyone's all riled up about black people, so why don't we fucking make some money off of it? And then they kind of accelerate the decline of their own business. Is kind of funny in its own right. Here's a little weird factoid from the history of Smoky Mountain Wrestling and the Gangsters that, like his promos, I can't stop thinking about. At one point during the Gangsta's run, they had a feud with The Undertaker.
So funny.
He was coming down, like Smoky Mountain was kind of like a little bit of a feeder territory, kind of like how TNA, I guess, is somewhat associated with WWE now. They would send people down and give them a little bit of a boost.
Part of the thing where they hanged the baby doll, the white baby doll.
Yeah, tell us about the baby doll, Joe.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's much more to say other than the Gangsters. They bought a little white baby doll, and then they strung her up by a noose, and they hanged her for the crowd.
And this was in a feud with The Undertaker,
Yeah.
which in some respects is inexplicably the most interesting thing about this story. But like, it's wild to hear, like, Undertaker apparently was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, man. You can use the baby doll and all that.
I
That's
love
kind of,
that.
there's like a voodoo element to it. That's pretty cool, man. Yeah. And they had, unfortunately, the match itself, there was 2 matches. They did a 3-on-2 and then they did a tag team match, both of which ended in like kind of a big schmoz, double DQ situation or whatever it is. But there is not really full footage of the events because they were the kind of the spot shows that they would do at the fairgrounds and whatnot. There is, however, promos of The Undertaker being like, New Jack, the gangsters, you rant and rave about race and politics. Oh, and The Undertaker gets his hands on Mr. Mustafa and downtown D'Lo Brown. And I'm like, all right, I am in a simulation now. Like, this can't be real. This is, and then of course, absolutely brilliant and showing the range. The Gangsters do a promo in a graveyard to prove they're not scared of that mean old Undertaker, which is like in black and white with a theremin going.
It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
New Jack like just immediately being like, I'm not scared of the like.
Yeah, they're all trying to act machismo.
It's really funny because like there's a part of my mind where like New Jack doesn't give a shit about the Undertaker. He wouldn't sell for him, but it's like he's like one of the biggest guys in wrestling, and he's doing like the whole like Undertaker. I'm gonna dig up this grave and show that I'm not scared. And Mustafa's like, don't do it, no.
I think I heard something.
And they all run away. And a little black cat walks across, and Jim Cornette hits "Don't Fear the Reaper" by the Blue Oyster Cult. Now, here's where I get to tell you something even more fucked up about the match that happened. And I think we found like a 2-minute clip of it online from a fan in the audience. But I did dig up old fan report of someone who was actually at the show. It was a 3-on-2 handicap match. The Gangsters versus Tracy Smothers and The Undertaker in a salute the flag match.
Oh my god.
Where the loser of the match would have to salute the flag. I know what you're thinking. Did 2024 Mark Calloway time travel to be part of this match?
Also, what were the flags?
Well, the gang... You've buried the leads, Joe. The Gangsters had their special gangster flag.
Which is just black, as far as I know.
It's just black, and they would lay it on top. They beat them up, they'd lay the flag on top of people. Undertaker and Tracy Smothers, and in another match with Bullet Barber Armstrong.
Please don't tell me it was the Confederate
They had the
flag.
Dixie flag. They had the Confederate
Oh
flag.
my fucking god.
So at the end of the match, of course, D'Lo Brown, he gets beat up and made to salute the flag, but Mustafa and New Jack run away before that. And the fan, and then Tracy Smothers is like, get back here. Let me tell you something, New Jack.
Oh my god.
The South will rise again.
That is shocking.
If you don't salute the Confederate flag,
and they're the good
everybody gonna
guys.
die. And everyone's like, yay!
Oh my god. No wonder the NAACP were like against this general, because it's not helping, is it?
No,
it's kind of like making things harder for black people in a lot of ways.
Well, the way they got around it in the end was they would put a warning underneath New Jack's promo saying that the views of the Gangsters of New Jack don't reflect those of Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
But it's not. The things they're saying aren't the issue. It's what they are riling up and making, like, the fact that...
Hey, you're exposing the hatred that's in all the hearts of the audience.
That's it. We'd prefer
Stop
to keep them
doing
kind of, like, buried, wouldn't we? Rather than, like, entice them.
That's why they sent The Undertaker, Joe, obviously.
Right,
like,
with his helpful Confederate flag. Thanks, guys.
I mean, yeah, it is a wild time, and I implore you, there's actually a series of videos where it's called, like, I think, the Gangsters' Reign of Terror in SMW, but there's all little clips and bits up there. If you've seen the OJ promo, you know, obviously that's a great little bit, but I think it does show their range. It shows the kind of, not just like, I don't know, not just the shock value, but I think the interaction with the audience and them like carrying that. Some of the bravest men in wrestling is all I can say from that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think in terms of like, you know, I think some people can handle that level of hate And, you know, on some level, New Jack definitely did, but also, like, this is a damaged man who has had the worst childhood you could possibly imagine.
And I don't think he realizes what he was kind of
carrying,
taken on, because like, you can tell with D'Lo, he's like, shit, like, you know, this affected me. And I think New Jack is so, like, kind of self-assured throughout the years, and like, no, of course I didn't get upset by people calling me that. But
that would ruin the gimmick.
Yeah, but I think you carry that with you, like, you know, that, and there's lots of people who like to be like, oh, this is the moment here because of this injury where New Jack became this, like, you know, more fucked up person, whatever it is. And it's like, I think it's a gradual accumulation of a lot of weird shit over the years. We got the Gangstas taking on the Rock and Roll Express for the tag team titles. 1995 Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
And this version we watched has Dave Meltzer and Jim Cornette on commentary.
Which is insanely entertaining.
And we have done, for Pay-Per-View Classic, we reviewed some matches from Wrestling Gold, which also has Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer as friends doing commentary.
Joe booked from the 5 DVD set.
Did.
She booked her own pay-per-view. And these two provide unvarnished insight into what was going on. Including at one point where Jim Cornette is like, well, you know, I kind of felt like having the gangsters in here was kind of like, you know, way to get heat. You know, back in Alabama in the 70s, one of the best runs they ever did, they had a heel black guy and they paint him white every night. Used to sell out the building every single time.
What the fuck?
It's just when you think, like, I never cease to be amazed at, like, the random depths to which wrestling is so fucked up.
Yep.
I mean, I was usually thinking about the people who work at, like, WWE Vault, whatever it is, where it's like they're, like, literally, like, opening up the arc of the comic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there, but some of it will literally melt your face. But yeah, the eyes I had in this match, Joe, were primarily fixed on one, can New Jack wrestle? Can he do much in the ring? And two, what is the actual audience reaction to what they're seeing? Because not only have you got the heel heat of the gangsters and everything they represent here in Smoky Mountain, you've also got probably the most beloved tag team in the history of this whole region of America in Ricky and Bobby in the Rock and Roll Express.
I can't believe that this is from 1995.
It's like 1985, you could say. Like,
yeah, genuinely. It feels like 10 years ago.
Well, fuck, it worked. That's exactly what we were going for.
It's fucking, I don't know. The more I see of the Rock and Roll Express, the more I get it.
Yeah.
But I still struggle to really, like them.
I've been slowly building up my enjoyment of them over the last 20 or so years, and I am a fan.
I feel the commentary for this really did help explain the appeal of
what is the appeal then? Because I think, like, I first saw them, I think, listened to one of the first episodes of the Out Here podcast where they brought in the Rock and Roll Express.
It must have been like 100.
And I was like, these old Ren and Stimpy human looking I fucking hated them so much. And I refused to accept that they were ever legends or had anything to offer to the world of wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, over the years, I think the Young Bucks are such fans of them. They've used them in so many angles in AEW. I'm like, all right, this is pretty fucking cool. But what is the appeal as it was explained to you?
So I think the main kind of appeal of the Rock and Roll Express comes from Ricky Morton.
Yeah.
He's got an extremely sympathetic face.
Boy, does he ever. And the ladies love him, Joe.
I don't get that, but I mean, maybe it's the eyes.
See, like doing my hair like that, that kind of feathered mullet?
Please don't.
Nice
I'll do it as well, actually, if you do it.
Okay, sorry, you call my bluff.
Thanks. He has these, like, just very innocent looking eyes that are huge. They're beautiful eyelashes. And apparently what he would do is when he'd be beaten up in matches, he would plead to the members of the audience. He would, like, look at individual people in the front row and mime, please help me.
So you've got a guy who's already really emotive.
Really sympathetic. People are used to having to, like, not protect him, but, like, you know, well, vocally, I guess, in that wrestling way.
People
of being
are
like,
stood up, like, you know, reaching out, like, I'm trying to help
We've got to help him.
There are 3 good old boys in the front row of this fucking match who I swear to God have
scary man.
one leg over the barricade the entire goddamn time.
They are, like, inches away from a fight here.
Yeah, the wrong kind of heat is a phrase that's used very often in commentary from Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer here. But in terms of actually seeing New Jack wrestle, you know, what was interesting was seeing him do. It was very much the style of the territory. Like, if he's in ECW, yeah, it's all the hardcore stuff, all the hardcore stuff, all the gimmickry and all that jazz. In here, though, it's like hands cupped over his ears, cheap shots, no clean breaks, hiding in the ropes, total chicken shit, old school
Yeah.
territories heel. You know, slipping and sliding away. If someone's going to get their hands on New Jack for all the things he said, he tags in the big man Mustafa.
Yeah.
Mustafa gets a little bit of heat, quick tag to New Jack, he might come in, mouth off. He is very much the kind of the snake in the grass, like almost like the type of heel that you wouldn't expect from someone who's speaking such viciousness. And that just riles the audience up even more.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, he's not just this like bastard who's saying all these horrible things. He's also a phony because he's not tough. And he does these promos as well, the build to this, where he's like, I've been in prison, I've fought men who molested their own children, I've fought men who've killed other men, you know, I've been in fights, the Rock and Roll Express, they can wrestle but they can't fight. And then New Jack in the match doesn't really do much of either. He's kind of just like a pure coward in many respects.
Jim Cornette mentions that New Jack and Mustafa Saeed worked for only $15 a night when they started in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Wow, fucking hell.
For that amount of heat, $15? That's not worth it.
You'd be entitled to a hot dog and a handshake and maybe a handful of popcorn to take home with you as well. Like.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Mustafa's pencil shaving's a taxable expense, if you wouldn't mind as well, Mr. Cornette. But yeah, let me tell you, Mustafa's the lad in here who's doing the lion's share of the work. He's got some cool moves. He does some kind of like step up, like stuff out of the corner, like a Vader bomb and all of that. He's got good speed. He keeps up with both members of the Rock and Roll Express, and they kind of build a lot of the build up to the hot tag. And the match is so straightforward and formulaic in that Ricky gets beat on, help me, beat on, and then we get the big hot tag.
Well, with the Ricky Morton thing as well, Jim Cornette, which is again part of what made me kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. Jim Cornette says he almost quit wrestling 12 times in his career, all because of Ricky Morton when he had to work against him. Because the level of heat he would get when he was feuding against the Rock and Roll Express, he would be like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth being in this business. I'm going to quit. The fans love him so much. I'm scared for my life.
But, like, here's the thing, right? If you're getting that level, like, this is an audience who's going to, like, fucking beat you up for real because you're not even introducing the racial element.
No.
Just the notion of a bad guy being bad.
Guy with a tennis racket.
Without your intergenerational racism I know Jim Cornette is like was in a silo then in terms of like knowing about the world outside of wrestling. I don't think he didn't know anything outside of the world of wrestling then, and maybe he probably doesn't now.
Yeah.
But you'd have to know that you were playing with fire.
I think he wants that though. He's got that promoter brain.
Not much of a promoter though, because you can see there's empty seats in this house.
Oh yeah, there are.
You know, and this is kind of like, this isn't like the tail end of this is kind of when they're getting going with this gimmick.
I'm not saying he's got good instincts, but I think he doesn't care because as a promoter you just want reaction.
Yeah, well they certainly got reaction, but I just don't think it put butts in seats at the end of the day. But the whole match does build up to that big hot tag where Mustafa eats the drop kick and the roll up. And they did a nice job explaining in commentary that they weren't like kind of the Hardy Boys of their day, that they didn't do big flashy moves, but it was the speed and the precision, and it's a beautiful finish, like just out of nowhere. Mustafa gets the drop kick, the sunset flip, New Jack doesn't even come in to stop it, the match is over, they're beaten nice and clean, but then after the match, New Jack said it's basically all of his friends, he's like, hey, do you want to come do a wrestling angle? So all these dudes come up with like slapjacks and nightsticks, and they're like, it's a Rodney King style beatdown. And that's when it's like, you could look side by side, like the footage from the Rodney King incident and like what they're doing here. Like, fucking hell. And you can't be like, it's the Attitude Era, man. It's like, this is meant to be old school, wholesome wrestling. And I think for all the times that Jim Cornette is like pointing the finger at other promotions about going too far and like maybe leaning on the kind of the real a bit too much, it's like, you went as real could fucking be here.
Yeah. Like,
you were literally inviting the most parallel of parallels. And I don't think there was a way you could have invoked more racial tension. And like, New Jack even slips out the N-word. There's times where he's trying to say, like, not say the N-word. And it slips out more than a few times in those promos. So it's kind of like, your business got fucked up by this. Well, yeah. And New Jack probably launched his career and became a big star out of this. I feel good for New Jack at the very least. Him and Mustafa.
I'm glad something good came out of it.
That they were able to springboard into something more.
Yeah.
And like get out of town before, because Jim Cornette at the end was like, I don't know what else to do with you, because it's like, They did win the tag team titles at one point when Ricky and Robbie just beat them clean in the ring, and then afterwards the gangsters threatened the referee with a racial discrimination lawsuit, who then reversed the decision and gave them the tag team titles.
Oh my god.
Which is, again, like, you found every, like, what's another thing that white people get wild up about down here?
Oh.
What's another thing that, you know, and I think that the cupboard was bare at the end, like,
yeah,
like there wasn't another stereotype or another hot button issue to press. What did you think of the match, though? Because I was interested to see New Jack do a little bit of the old school heelery, but there wasn't much to it, I don't think.
No, there wasn't much to it at all. It's a very basic, mostly punches and kicks, and as you say, a bit of that kind of, see that Memphis style of like,
less is more type of thing.
Yeah, not much happening in the ring.
There is an argument you could make where you do these crazy promos and this like real like provocative stuff, and then you give them a match that's so wild, like, God damn, I'm going to tune to Smoky Mountain next week. But I think the match itself, while not bad, the action was so kind of rote and normal.
Yeah.
That I think at the end of the day, anyone watching this who was riled up by the antics of the gangsters is just going to be like, fucking hate the gangsters. Except they probably wouldn't say gangsters, they say different words instead.
Yeah.
I don't think that the action of the match just took them to another place other than still being like racially aggravated.
Yeah.
Which is probably not where you want your wrestling business to be. What'd you give it, star-wise?
I gave it a 3 out of 5, which I think in hindsight was a bit overly generous. But it is, I mean, it's...
He does a great promo afterwards as well.
He does do a good promo after the fact. And it you know, is kind of compelling. You know, you've got Ricky Morton doing his thing.
Yeah.
It's just there's not much actually happening.
It just feels weird to play with fire so much to get you to this point and then just kind of do a match.
Yeah.
You know, it's strange in that respect.
Yeah.
So their exit from Smoky Mountain is kind of disharmonious, and there's heat between Cornette and New Jack because of it. Essentially, like, they have dates left. He's like, look, we're going to finish up with you. I'm actually going to bite my tongue here and go and speak to Paul Heyman because I think he might work well in ECW.
Well, apparently Jim was just going to get rid of New Jack early, and New Jack was pissed off about it because, as you say, he still had dates left.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, hang on, what about me? And so to try and like appease things between them, he then spoke to Paul Heyman and was like, hey, can you do you want to bring on this guy?
And then he left early and left Cornette in the lurch for a bunch of dates. So it's kind of like a non-stop circle of people fucking each other over. But New Jack finds himself now on the East Coast with Mustafa as the gangsters, and embraced fully by an audience that is much more into counterculture stuff that they were representing. Wasn't done for heel heat. They were like kind of like, I don't say in terms of presentation they weren't very different in that, you know, they had obviously the same look and all that. They weren't doing these racially kind of aggressive promos or anything like that. They weren't trying to push those buttons. Heyman viewed them as being cool and a gateway to access a black audience, which ECW didn't really have a huge amount of. It gave them street cred, it made them seem cool, and for the reasons that I first watched ECW and saw, like, whoa, look at this cool black guy, like that, it worked. It was very marketable. It made ECW, it was another string to the bow of making them feel like legitimate, that they knew what was cool, they reflected what you were seeing on TV, on MTV, and in magazines and all that, not the whiter than white World Wrestling Federation or WCW at the time. So it was very mutually beneficial. The gangsters were in the tag team division for, you know, a fair amount of time. Mustafa left around about in late 96 or thereabouts, and he did briefly form a tag team with one of the Eliminators, because Perry Saturn also left, which led to my favourite Dream Team name of all time, the Gangstonators.
The Gangstonators.
John Cronus and New Jack, who liked to do cocaine with each other, and backstage environment in ECW, Joe, a man of New Jack's disposition, the drug use was plenty and often.
Yes.
But this is kind of around the time where he is saying that to do, like, he would, you know, do the drugs to do the matches, as opposed to do the drugs to do the promos.
Yeah.
Hey, some of the best promos you've ever listened to, folks, including from John Moxley, who admits in his book, it's like, hey, I've just done cocaine. Get that camera. Here comes the promo. I think there is an intensity that comes that fit right in ECW.
Yeah.
But also, as well, at the same time, New Jack soon finds himself being, you know, not a guy expected to do matches as a normal wrestler. It's about the spots. It's about the gimmicks, the weapons, it all fits very perfectly together, it seems.
Yeah.
The use of the music throughout the matches.
I love that.
That was something that we had to kind of look kind of far and wide to find the clips of it, but you were able to see
hard.
it.
Yeah, I'm glad we managed to find anything at all. I think we managed to find like 3 or 4 matches of him with the music playing.
Natural Born Killers.
Great.
Fantastic. And I do think it goes to probably explain a large part of why his legacy is difficult for WWE to fully capitalize on.
Yes.
Because if you show a match of New Jacks now on a WWE Vault or whatever it is, or even when it was up on the network, it is dubbed horribly.
Yeah.
I remember getting my ECW DVDs I bought off of eBay in the mail in 2004.
Wow.
Being so excited. Get my RF Video ECW DVDs. And of course, they don't even have the production value of a WWE network. So I put in the New Jack match and it literally be like just a plain drum beat as loud as possible. Couldn't hear the crowd, couldn't hear the commentator, couldn't hear the moves or the match.
Yeah.
I remember going from thinking like New Jack was the coolest guy ever to like, oh, this sucks. So it was kind of hard, I guess, in that respect. You can't talk about New Jack and ECW without talking about the mass transit incident.
Right.
And I feel it's probably worth having a little bit of a chat about that now. Now, the mass transit incident, I feel, is something that you probably heard about before you even heard about New Jack. Is that fair to say?
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
Definitely, it was an early thing I heard about, like when I was saying about like the Katie Vick.
Yeah.
Hand.
It's part of the scary stories of wrestling, so to speak.
Of course, I didn't know what it was. It's like kind of the Montreal Screwjob. When you only hear about it by name, you speculate. And
because it's called mass transit, it's very intriguing, yeah.
I thought, my head canon for this was like, okay, I know he's got the justifiable homicides.
Yeah.
It's called the mass transit incident. I thought maybe he'd like drove a car into a train or something.
No, actually, it was when Steve Austin got run over by Rikishi. That was the mass
Right,
transit.
yeah.
Actually, it was the plane ride from hell because they're actually transiting a mass amount of wrestlers doing drugs and doing horrible things. That's what that was. So yeah, the mass transit incident, like I remember I read about that in like, it would have been like a Mick Foley book or something like that, like early doors. And I remember we talked a bit about it in the ECW episode. It did come up on the ECW documentary, where a large part of it was kind of trying to explain it as, well, this was one of these things that happened because ECW was on the fringes, they're running on such a small budget that sometimes things fell through the cracks through no fault of our own, don't sue us, all
no
that.
fault of our own.
Well,
yeah.
someone lied about their age, and that's it.
And we were powerless to verify that age. There's absolutely nothing we could have done.
I think what Eric Koulas did in that day was very, very disrespectful to the business.
You know, he actually did say that.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah. It's
fucking
it's
heinous
shocking.
piece of shit.
They call him Paul Heinous for a reason, but because they went in on it hard on the dark side of the ring, and I think they kind of framed almost the whole story of New Jack through the mass transit incident, which in some respects, like, it set legal precedent. It's a big thing that happened in wrestling, but also as well in terms of letting New Jack be defined by this kind of cloud of like crazy shit that's happened in his career as opposed to what he did as a wrestler. You know, I kind of feel like it almost plays into his hands to just talk about New Jack through the lens of this one thing that happened. And it's one of the most shocking things that's happened in wrestling. And for those of you who are wondering as well, no, we're not reviewing the match.
Oh,
we're not,
Jesus,
We're not
no.
reviewing him versus
Is
Gypsy
that
Joe.
Is it even possible to review the match? Because I couldn't find it.
There's footage of it exists from a fan cam. Yeah, it's
I
out there.
tried to watch it to find out kind of...
We've seen the footage, but we're not like,
But, like, it's-
hey Joe, how many stars are you
Nah.
given for this man's attempted murder?
The stuff I've seen has been heavily edited.
Yeah.
You don't see the whole thing.
Yeah, so go on. Tell me what's about
Okay,
that.
so-
What happens?
So basically, a 17-year-old boy, Eric Koulas, he came to ECW and he was supposed to have a match with 2 micro wrestlers. It's Tiny the Terrible and I forget the name of the other guy.
They're the Twin Towers. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And the idea was, so this kid, Eric, he was huge. He was like 400 pounds. And he was going to like do these like power bombs, these 2 guys at the same time and do all these power moves and
Yeah,
stuff.
they had a little match worked out, basically, yeah.
And his gimmick was that he was like a bus driver.
Yeah.
So he's got his like little uniform on and his little hat. I will say, I saw the footage of him and immediately was like, that's a boy. That's a teenager. Like he looks 17.
Yeah.
I think this whole thing of
If it was 17, 18, but it's the 21,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, let's
he
get fucking
lied
real.
about his age. Just look at him to know you'd need an ID to verify that fact. Like, I wouldn't fucking take a risk like that. No way.
They're throwing together a show. Axel Rotten was one of the guys, he no shows, so this kid all of a sudden finds himself in a match that he shouldn't be in.
So yeah, he ends up going up against. I think he's teaming with Devon Dudley, and he's going up against New Jack and
Mustafa. It's the gangsters.
Mustafa, yeah.
So this is like 96 thereabouts. They've been in ECW for 6 months to a year around at this point. Yeah.
And Eric Kulas apparently told Heyman that he had wrestling experience. They had trained with Killer Kowalski. Paul Heyman goes, right, that's good. I'm not going to verify that ever. I listen. I believe everything I ever hear. Apparently, suddenly. And so then it comes down to Eric and New Jack have to kind of decide what's happening in the match. And generally what happens, especially in ECW, but especially at this time period as well, is that the veteran of the match decides when you're going to talk about it and what you're going to do in the match.
That's not an ECW thing. That's a
wrestling thing.
101 type of a thing, along with shaking everyone's hands and all that other stuff as well. But generally speaking, it's like, it's that way for a reason. Really. It's common sense. The person who knows how the match is going to be put together is the veteran, and if they want to defer, they can, but that's their decision. So he's asking, I might do this move, that, just doing all the stuff that if he had been actually trained and wasn't just a 17-year-old kid with pie in the sky dreams of being a wrestler, he wouldn't have probably done that.
No, he basically says to New Jack, he comes over to him and he's like, hey, let's go over the match. That's thing one you don't do. Thing two, he was like, my dad's in the front row. Do you mind if I get some offensive moves in? I want to go over you a bit. You do not do that with a veteran. No way.
And keep in mind at this point as well, Heyman has already said to New Jack, do whatever you want to him.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I feel always gets sidestepped, is that ECW was like this, and a lot of other promotions were, but ECW is the one that's kind of in the spotlight here, so to speak, of, this kid wants to be a big fucking star?
Yeah.
All right. And worst case scenario, he gets fucked up and we show, hey, if you're some untrained jabroni, this is what's going to happen to you if you dare to show up and try and get on the show. Or maybe it might be a great spectacle and he'd be like, thank you so much, sir, for maiming me or whatever. They're thinking so insularly and so selfishly that they don't think that there's a third path here, which is something very, very bad happens.
Yeah. But then, so the third thing that happens is that he says to New Jack, he's like, I'd really like to get some colour. I'd really like it. Well, I think that was maybe decided by Heyman.
You're going to get colour.
You're going to get colour. But Kulas had never really done a match before, so he'd certainly never bladed before. So Kulas says to New Jack, hey, do you mind doing it for me? Which is, again, that happened in Brett versus Austin.
Generally speaking, again, it's one of those veteran type of things where it's like, it's not where you go, will you cut me as a default?
No, you do it yourself.
You do it yourself. If you really trust the person and you want them to do a particular way, sure, you can.
But let's be real, it's like Bret Hart is one of the few people would trust to do something like that.
It's absolutely the exception, not the rule in any sense.
And as well, it's something that wrestlers don't have a lot of experience cutting other people with weapons and blading.
It's
them
completely
in that way.
Different, yeah.
It's so different.
He didn't have a razor blade, which is your standard issue, how you cut someone, or a hard way, you by maybe punching you over the eyebrow and splitting that and getting blood that way. For whatever reason, New Jack, who spent all day doing drugs at this point,
because New Jack's whole gimmick at this point, isn't it, is he brings in the bin
full of all the gimmicks,
So I wonder if it was just one of the things that was lying around. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, or if he brought that with him.
But it's a surgical scalpel tied onto a length of wood. So because I remember hearing, when I first heard about this and I saw the footage for the first time, I think it would have been on the Rise and Fall DVD in 2004 when I first saw it. And it was like, he's literally got a knife. It looked like a knife because it's a big length with a sharp bit on top. And he cuts him like he's going to cut you with a knife. He's slicing.
Well, yeah, so apparently, according to New Jack, who, by the way, had been on coke all day and angry that this kid was, thinking he could ask for certain things in the match, New Jack, he goes for the head for the first couple of strokes and he kind of gets a couple of cuts in, and he says he struggled to get any blood at first, so he did it a big one then basically. And the shape of it is, because I think, again, if you've not used a scalpel, you're not aware of how different a scalpel is to a razor blade.
It pulls flesh away.
It's designed to tear into muscle.
Well, that's what you used to do in zoology. When I used to dissect squirrels and foxes and stuff like that from my zoology degree.
It glides like butter.
Like the amount of here's how I'll put it in perspective for you folks. I remember when we all did a rabbit for the first time, and we did the cut down like that. And think of mind, rabbit, layers of skin, fat, muscle, all that. Everyone, almost everyone, not me because I was very good at dissection. You could see the line everyone had accidentally cut through all of the organs.
Yeah.
So with one stroke, they went through hair,
that's it,
flesh, fat, and straight. So it's a fairly dangerous device.
It's very
Shouldn't
dangerous.
Be in a wrestling ring. Yeah.
Never should be in a wrestling ring. No.
Dare I say, Coke doesn't make the strokes any better.
No. And if he was struggling as well at first to get the blood to come out, then if he's not done this many, I don't know if that's true. If he'd not done that many times before, he certainly hadn't done it many times before with a scalpel.
Nah, I don't think he'd done that before.
So he ends up with this big, like kind of semicircle on the kid's head.
Ugh.
It's like a smiley face, he called it, and you can see just the blood, like it's like an oil spill. It's just.
So there's loads of elements to this that make it a fucking complicated disaster.
Yeah.
Firstly, obviously, we go to trial about this, but in the aftermath of what's happened there, you've got the father who's in the front row screaming the entire time for them to stop the match. He's only 17, whereas the referee doesn't even go into the ring, mind. So this is less a wrestling match and more just feels like a snuff movie because it's like, and that's one of the main defenses when we get to trial. It's like, hey, it's a wrestling match. It's like, well, Devon Dudley and Mustafa are just kind of standing there with their mouths open as New Jack does this and then cuts a promo saying that he hopes he dies. And then you have the father afterwards calling him racial slurs. You can probably guess what those were. Sorry for that word appearing on all of your heads throughout this episode, but it's just one of them things, I guess. And, Heyman straight away, I think, knows what's happened. New Jack gets put into a car and sent to another hotel because you think there's going to be a fucking mob is going to be formed to come and get him.
I mean, yeah.
Whole thing's an absolute fucking shitstorm. And what probably has made this thing have a second life all these years later, because it was a big shocking thing when it kind of came out in the wrestling books at the time and on the internet forums, and then the DVD came out and had another life. The way they talk about this in The Dark Side of the Ring, where New Jack goes full character mode, where he's like, I didn't want to kill him, but I wanted to take him close to death. And he's so in a fucking wrestling promo mode, and you can literally see the big fucking glass of drink in him.
Oh yeah, the vodka and juice.
Now, I'm not saying that he's not a fucking sadistic bastard and what he did here wasn't fucking horrible evil, but I think that his description of these events in that interview means that this now lives in infamy as this man took great joy and glee in this and all the subsequent heinous shit that he did.
So I couldn't find an uncut version of this match. Apparently it exists somewhere.
The tape traders had it back in the day, yeah.
Apparently in the uncut version, you actually can hear New Jack at one point after the kid starts gushing. He leans down and he quietly says, "Hey kid, you all right?" And Eric Kulas says, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he said he was fine because he was fine. Like, it's probably just adrenaline. He didn't know.
Well, he says as well,
what I mean is like, that's a very big difference between, I hope you bleed to death, and checking in on the kid and being like, hey, actually, are you all right? Like,
that's a big standout, isn't
suddenly
it?
It's like there's a difference between what's going on in kayfabe and what's going on in a shoot here.
And also as well, like, he says many times in interviews with regards to him doing the promo afterwards, he's like, well, he knew there was a big fucking situation happened. You might as well lean into it. The fans are already this way.
That's what you're told to do.
And I feel what you see in him in so many subsequent interviews where because Eric Kulas later died, and he died of unrelated.
Yeah.
He died because he had a
gastric
bypass surgery that went wrong. He died as a result of complications of that surgery. It's basically carte blanche, no more so than the 4 justifiable homicides. He kind of says whatever, it's part of the myth. And I feel he does egg on the heinousness and, like, is that as bad as actually being that heinous to do those actions? For many people it is. One's the same as the other. But I do think it's worth bearing in mind, and it's a horrible thing to do, that he is like, haha. Like, he knows this adds to his character, his myth, his legacy. That is part of him. Yeah. And he is not necessarily wined and dined on it, but he's been spoken about and feared and revered and all that because of that horrible incident. What it did do, big kind of picture-wise, was have wrestling kind of, and this type of violent wrestling get put on trial where, what is cooperation in the ring? Can you say this is felony assault because these men are entering into an agreed upon simulated combat?
Well, it's so difficult because Kulas asked New Jack to cut him. That's kind of like, that was like one of the main key points of the argument for the defense.
And the way New Jack tells his defense of it, and the court records are there to back it up, his defense attorney went down the road of, I don't know if I can get this, because it's trial by jury.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can get this jury to believe that you didn't do something heinous and go over the line, but I know that I can frame you in a certain light with this jury by exposing the racial prejudice and the fact they were like, they made on Heyman on the stand repeat what the father had said. As soon as racial slurs are being dropped on the record, in New Jack's mind, I'm innocent of all charges. Now, that in my mind is part of him kind of wanting to add to the myth of like, yeah, and I knew I should have went down for it, but I didn't because my lawyer was able to convince this guilty feeling jury that I was prejudiced against. It's a fucking mess, like,
Well, I wonder as well if part of the reason he's never said, oh yeah, it went too far, I didn't mean for it to get as bad as it was, is because legally that would imply negligence.
Yeah.
Which he would probably not have gotten off the way he did, because I think he was acquitted in the end.
He was acquitted, yeah. And they went for a civil suit afterwards.
Which was also...
But that happened because Eric died in the middle of it. It was dropped. But I think the belief was that the civil suit would have more likely, because that's in a judge's ruling as opposed to a jury of your peers being convinced. I think that the civil suit, who knows, it wouldn't have necessarily been as open and I don't know if it would necessarily safe to assume it would have went one way or the other,
They tried to argue in the civil suit that what happened with the New Jack thing, because, to be clear, the boy had 50 stitches, he severed 2 arteries and received permanent nerve damage in his face.
And you can see, there's interviews with him afterwards in the news and stuff, and he is, he's fucked up from it.
Yeah, he never wrestled again.
He's traumatized, he's, beyond shook. And, I remember, as a wrestling fan at the time, he was just like, well, that's what you get when you try and play with the big boys in ECW. It helped ECW's image at the time. Because ECW's image was about bravado and balls and that's kind of one of the saddest things about it, is that in many respects we've talked about these kind of stories about New Jack helping lift up the image of New Jack as a myth and all that. But I feel with the mass transit incident, it's as much was used to be kind of low-key wink and a nudge. Don't fuck around with ECW. This is the real violent stuff. This is the real deal. And I kind of feel like that's one of the most sick things about it, is that it was used not to build up a person, but a promotion.
Yeah. One of the most sickening things for me watching it wasn't even the blood, which I was expecting. It's the audience reaction to it. They chant, "You fat fuck" at him. There is a period of time where he is bleeding and they're kind of a bit awkward and it's they don't know what to do. But then it's kind of I don't know, there's something changes in the atmosphere of the room and they're like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. And they just fucking turn on the kid.
Oh yeah, but that's the ECW audience at the time.
It's so strange.
Despise the weak.
It's disgusting. Because it's one thing for someone like New Jack to have to keep up, you're part of the show must go on, you've got to keep that character. I don't think the things he said in that ring, I don't think you could use in a court of law, which is why they didn't.
Yeah.
But it's just shocking to me that a fan base can respond like that and have just no empathy, no sympathy for what
it was no place for empathy. But there's no place for empathy. I remember I can't remember there was one ECW documentary where they were like, oh, the ECW fans, you came out and you killed a puppy in the ring, they'd start chanting that's hardcore with a wink and a nod. But the more I think about it over the years and the more how-to episodes we do about ECW, I end up kind of thinking geez, it really was the madhouse of extreme. They kind of made the audience lean into the worst aspects of themselves. Very similar to Smoky Mountain in a way, and this wasn't a racial thing, of course not, but this was very much appealing to an audience's worst instincts. And in the light of New Jack, getting away with it, for lack of a better term, his character is now, with Mustafa away in other territories and whatnot, it becomes about New Jack as this kind of this persona, this figure, which is almost unleashed. He would say, and Heyman would say as well, that you didn't really tell him what to do. It'd just be kind of hey, you got to run in on this match.
Yeah.
And matches were kind of few and far between in some respects. It was always about, as I said at the start, the big run in, the huge pop, one of the pops of the night, particularly after Sandman left for WCW. New Jack filled that vacancy of here's the real tough badass who just comes in when some asses need to get kicked. And I don't think it was that they tried to capitalize off the mass transit incident because they weren't invoking it necessarily on TV. And I think that was a legal reason because there was, perhaps legal jeopardy they'd find themselves in. But it again led to that kind of like I like ECW. Here's this guy. Oh yeah, him. Yeah, but did you hear what he really did? There was this guy, and part of that kind of myth of ECW was built in part by those kind of whispered, here's the real thing that happened, the real scary shit that's going on. New Jack was more than happy to do that. There was a steady supply of drugs and a steady supply of things for him to jump off of.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of clips of New Jack jumping off of tall things, Joe.
Which, by the way, I haven't mentioned this to you yet, but in that interview with the journalist, he actually mentions that he loved jumping off things even as a child. His mum, when she would drive back from work, he would climb on top of their house. This is New Jack, so I don't know if this is true. Maybe it was
5 stories high.
Yeah. Apparently he would jump off the house, like, onto her car.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Which she was not happy about, let's just say.
Now, we live in a day and age where, once a month or once a month and a half, we get to watch AEW and see usually someone fall off something very, very tall indeed. Yep. Often that man's name is Darby Allin. There's been some extremely sick, crazy, wild, hardcore stuff that we've seen in the last 2 years in particular while watching our modern wrestling, and there's always discourse about it online. But I don't want to say that what happens now in wrestling is safe. It's not. It's dangerous. There's risks involved. They're calculated risks. But they feel a little bit more thought out or workshopped a little bit in some respects.
There's less drugs involved as well.
But man, some of these fucking falls, I think we watched a compilation of like every big fall that he took. There was like 30 or 40 of them, it felt like, in total. Sometimes it's, from balconies in kind of slightly smaller buildings or whatever it is, landing onto a big pile of fans or a few tables. But more often than not, because this was like 98, 99 when ECW was running some of the slightly bigger buildings, kind of like 10,000 seats or whatever it is. Big concrete floor, one table, he falls down, and it's usually shin first. I swear to God, like if some of the spots that New Jack routinely was taken on TV then happened now, there'd be way more discourse. Because it's not like, you're going through 10 tables and a sheet of glass and all this other kind of crazy stuff. I think you and I sighed a sigh of relief when WWE started using the big whoopee cushion underneath the table. But like New Jack, these things that he would take, like the only explanation is drugs.
Even that doesn't fully explain it for me.
Because it loosens you up a bit, doesn't it?
A bit, but like he's still landing feet first. I just don't know how you do that, even with drugs, and not break something. Like, it's amazing he was in as good as nick as he was.
Well, that was it, just a little bit more drugs and you come out the next night. And it was kind of like, that was the expectation. Because I remember one of the first things we did when we started doing New Jack research, I was like, oh great, here's an old TV VHS rip, you can hear the music, Balls Mahoney versus New Jack, and they actually have a match. But it's just kind of like, hey, he comes out with a garbage bin full of weapons, they hit each other, the music's played, and then Balls hits his finisher and wins. And it's kind of like, oh, that's weird, that's awkward. I remember like watching, like, oh my god, I found New Jack versus Mike Awesome. I watched that as a kid on ECW on Bravo TV. And again, it's like, they have a kind of match, he hits with all the bits, and then powerbomb and he loses. It's like, oh, that's kind of awkward and weird.
Yeah.
You want his appearance. No more than the Sandman, the appearance is, I want to see the big cool spot. But Sandman didn't jump off no fucking balcony.
No.
He hit you with a stick and get the same pop. The thing that was wild was hearing New Jack in a U-shoot absolutely furious about fans chanting ECW when he would do the big fucking jump. Why did he hate the East?
It wasn't ECW who did it, was it? It wasn't ECW jumping off a 12-foot fall.
I didn't hear many New Jack chants during his time in ECW. And again, it feels like a large part of his, legacy in ECW feels like the promotion piggybacking off of what he brought to the table, his authenticity. There was a great promo we watched. It was nearly 10 minutes long where he's just out on the streets. I think he's in I'm in my hometown, Harlem.
Yeah.
Side note, the story about him going to South Central LA for the first time with a map.
Oh, yeah. Working out all the territories.
Yeah, and all the street names so he could kind of pretend that he knew what he was talking about.
And how he had a friend who was deaf. And so he asked her to teach him some sign language so he wouldn't have to throw up actual gang signs.
Yeah, get in hot water.
Yeah.
So instead of being like, thank you very much, like whatever it is, great stuff. But there's a promo we watched where, it would have been around kind of like late 98, early 99 in ECW, just a camera on him in a playground in Harlem. And he just, like, so much of what he says, like, explains his character, but also why ECW was kind of wanting to latch onto him, because it's all about how no one is legitimate, or no one's tough like he is. He doesn't care about wrestling. He doesn't care about belts. He doesn't care about winning. He just wants to fight. He just wants to be violent. His partner has to carry him up the stairs because he can't walk when he gets home. She has to feed him in his bed because he's so hurt. He doesn't care. And then the big bit that it, like, really is like sticks in my mind, he's like, all those other fucking pussies who weren't tough enough. Raven, that bitch, he left. Sandman, that fucking coward, he left. Stevie Richards, you dog. I'm just basically saying, no one's tough. No one's legitimate. That's ECW survived on that ethos.
Yeah.
No one's legitimate. Not even Raven and Sandman. That is ECW, you fucking idiots.
So he didn't say Sabu.
No, that's true, because Sabu was in and out so fucking often, you know. But that was the big part of it. It's like, hey, this guy's happy to burn every bridge.
Yeah.
Because he probably thinks he'll never get signed anywhere, you know. There was chat that he was maybe going to go to WCW around this time. But he believes Kevin Nash put the kibosh on it. He's going to come in with Master P and his No Limit Soldiers. But his belief was that Kevin Nash put the scraps to it because he thought we couldn't have an actual cool black wrestler here when we're all cosplaying as cool black wrestlers in the extremely white wolf pack.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to look at one of his matches from ECW now, which I feel is very emblematic of the whole ECW New Jack experience in a match. As it was revealed in 1999 that the man who had paid money to the Dudley Boys to run the Public Enemy and New Jack out of ECW, it was none other than his old tag team partner, the extremely evil and complex Mr. Mustafa Saeed. This comes to us from ECW's Living Dangerously 1999. Mustafa versus New Jack. There can only be one original gangster. And folks, for authenticity, we watched this on Joe's boyfriend's laptop, brackets me. Hey, you want to see this real fucking shit? Not that fucking pussy shit that you watch? This is the fucking real. I'm gonna put this on 360p, head over to Dailymotion.
To really authentically experience it, I think we should have watched it in like a single bed with one pillow.
Oh, no, a double mattress on the floor. Yeah. There you go. I had a double bed when I first met you.
You did, and two pillows.
2 yellow pillows. I do like that ECW is in a period of time where they are absolutely fine with alluding to wrestlers killing one another. As Joey Styles informs us, this may be the last time we ever see Mr. Mustafa. I'm like, that's pretty cool, Joey. And then 2 seconds later, because New Jack has vowed to kill Mr. Mustafa tonight at Living Dangerously.
Wow. They were actually not friends at this point, weren't they?
Turns out that was all just make-believe. Yep, all work.
That's
there
good.
And again, that's one of those things, because I was always like under the impression, the gangsters had a big fallout. No, just Mr. Mustafa did his own thing. They were always friends.
New Jack himself had said in an interview, was like, I think it was because he was upset that Mustafa didn't want to work as a tag team anymore, and he was like intimidated. Now I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, this is such a
He was
work.
intimidated by me and how cool I was.
And I was a bigger star than him. Yeah, okay, I'm getting it now.
But yeah, this is actually kind of funny because I thought for the years and years they had some sort of a blood oath. Since New Jack has passed, Mustafa's done a load more interviews, and I think it's interesting because there's a lot of times where he says things that are just tall tales about New Jack verbatim. Like, he believes that New Jack does have the justifiable homicides. It's maybe just not what people think it is. You know, wink, wink.
But they're still justifiable, right?
Yeah, okay. Right. He's very much doing the Bushwhacker Luke thing of like, I'm going to keep Butch's legacy alive. No, he did lick people. He has 4 justifiable lickings under his belt. He never ran out of slime, actually. Look, just want to let you know, folks, I've gotten into drawing recently, and the most fun I've had in the last week is drawing Mustafa, because he's always looking strange. And this look here, coming out to a bit of Wu-Tang Clan with his jaunty hat and his bandana inexplicably pulled over his nose.
I love that.
So fucking cool.
Yeah.
I want more people to talk about Mustafa. He's awesome.
Yeah,
he's great. And here comes New Jack with a whole lot of weapons.
He just immediately lobs all of them into the ring.
I mean, like, this is the norm. Like, as a visual and all that, because, you know, you had Raven, the shopping cart in WWE, but, like, did this do much for you? New Jack with the big bucket of plunder coming out?
Yeah, the vacuum cleaner and the toy lawnmower.
That was always actually quite enjoyable watching a bunch of these ECW bits with you, was that you had the same experience that I did when I was like 10 or 11, which is use you were like pointing at bits. Oh, I hope he uses the vacuum. That looks horrible. Spoiler, it is fucking horrible.
I bet.
He's got the vacuum cleaner. He's got the crutch, which is usually the first thing that he throws. He's got the keyboard. He hits him in the balls with a golf club that makes the head of the golf club fall off.
But what I love is that he kind of honky-tonk mans it with each individual item.
The disrespect.
No, I think New Jack would... I think... Actually, apparently in his autobiography, he talks about how Honky Tonk Man, like, invented the guitar spot and New Jack perfected it.
Oh, man, New Jack, when he does the guitar spot, even though the head of the guitar falls off in this match, which he grabs back, he does the big fucking dance with it. He plays it left and right, swings around. Whoa. And what's so funny is... You know, the last thing in my mind when I was first seeing this would have thought, oh, this is the bit of the old school and like invoking the names that you have there, but this is Smoky Mountain as fuck. This is USWA honky tonk Memphis style. He embellishes every little bit of it.
He mimes with every single. I don't know if he did this throughout his career because I know later on he did this less, but with this match in particular, every single weapon he has, he does a mime with it.
It's so fucking entertaining.
The vacuum cleaner, he pretends he's a housewife. The keyboard, he's like pretending he's in an office doing a little keyboard office job. With the golf club, he takes a full swing with it. Like, I just love that every single... It's not just like, oh, he's going to hit that guy with a weapon. It's like, what silly miming gimmick will he do with each individual thing he's got?
I remember when I like first ever got to speak to a wrestler. It's when I got to be a heel wrestling manager for a Fight Like Apes wrestling themed concert in Dublin. Jesus, would be like 2008, a million years ago. And the guy I was working with, because he, I think I mentioned before, but he'd worked with Sabu and Jake Roberts and all this stuff. So I was like, tell me everything, please. And like one of the few things that he would reveal to me was that, because Sabu did his matches through his wife and his partner at the time, she would come and speak to him and tell you what to do. And she was like, oh no, when you get out the stick, because he had a stick, it was his gimmick. He had like a walking stick. He was the Lord of the Manor, Paul Tracy. And he would hit you with the stick. And she's like, no, don't do that. Get the stick, hold it up for the audience, hit the ground, hit it left and right, maybe go over to the ring steps and hit it. And as soon as he said that to me, like every time you see like the big boss man, like any wrestler who has a gimmick, watch them. They will do everything they can because they want to. It's
a bit of magic, I think.
It absolutely is. Look what's in my hand, everyone.
Yeah, look what's in my hand. Look, it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes a sound. Yeah. It's a concrete item that exists.
And I think every single thing that New Jack has in his bucket is very, very real and looks like it hurts like fuck. He beats the shit out of Mustafa, who I don't think gets a single bit of offense in this match other than an errant low blow here or there. New Jack, not really big on selling at this point compared to what we saw of him in the Smoky Mountain matches and stuff like that. Here, it's very much like you hit me, it's kind of like,
yeah.
Like a Steve Austin almost, kind of like, you've slowed me down, but I'm not going to sell it because obviously that's lame. That's not what I do. We go out into the crowd. Again, very common occurrence with New Jack. Mustafa gets put on the table. The nice flourish is he gets duct taped to the table.
I like that.
New Jack climbs all the way up into the crowd, high-fiving everyone. And he's about to do one of the scariest fucking things in the world. And far from I'm blessing myself and making sure I'm okay, he's just like the cool charisma the whole time. He's fucking pointing at Mustafa. He does his sign and he just goes for it. And it's fucking horrible. It's so horrible. And apparently, because New Jack's a pretty big dude, when he'd land on you, it fucking sucked. Because he's like, you can't, when you're falling from that height, you can't kind of lessen the blow, really.
Yeah.
So it's all chest, arms, elbows.
Let's kind of feet first.
Ow. Ow. I think it's one of the most horrible recurring things I've seen in wrestling. And I feel like because I've seen now in modern wrestling so many more spectacular, stupendous, over-the-top, embellished versions of this. I watch these dives now, like as a kid, I was like, wah! But now I watch these dives, I'm like, oh my god, man. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, why did you just put... You could have put two tables.
Yeah.
You could have laid them out lengthways. It'd be a little bit easier, no? I don't know. But, he's not been told you got to do it this one way. This is just his way, and he's doing it.
Yeah.
What was it like as an experience this match? Because we have a very long carry back to the ring by the security. I like that.
They both drag them back to the ring where they're like, finish the match.
And then they just pin him. And, I don't want to say if you see one New Jack, you see them all, but that is the template right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the hand, gets dragged back to the ring by security. Bad guys put in the ring. New Jack pins him. Usually, someone might come in and beat him up, or afterwards, as happens here, he gets jumped. But yeah, New Jack does get his ass beat awful lot of the time, by heels running in and stuff like that. But what was the match like? Because this was a very hot crowd. This was like the period of ECW that I was most fond of when I was a kid. Because it was, many people's minds, it was on the downward tilt. But because it had a big audience and fans were really bought into the myth of ECW at this point, it had this real crazy atmosphere that made it feel super larger than life.
Well, those people will love why I loved this match, which is that I loved this. I really did. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
It really reminded me of like Matt Bourne, Doink the Clown.
What?
Because it has all these little gimmicks and fun worker, like kind of little toy things that you interact with.
He's doing all of his fun stuff.
Yeah, he's doing all this fun, silly stuff. But also, like Matt Bourne specifically,
there's a man who's committed crimes in the ring.
He's tough as nails. He's really scary.
Yeah.
He could hurt you for real. Like, I love that shit. It was so good.
Okay, just if this is your first ever episode of How to Wrestling, it's always worth bearing in mind. Look at the previous episodes. That's Joe's point of reference.
Yeah.
That's why it's so weird
I love
sometimes.
Doink the Clown.
But yeah, I thought this is what you would like about it.
Yeah.
Less the big dive and the risk, more the like, here's the fun thing. He's got all these funny bits that he's come out with.
The dive was impressive. I like the dive.
Yeah.
I haven't got go away heat for the dive by any means, but it was just a lot more fun than I thought it would be. It was a lot more silly, and it's just funny because I know
it's not scary or dangerous feeling. It's kind of like, it's a good time. It's a party. I want to go there.
But I don't think was there any blood in this match?
I think he got a little bit gigged at the end, did New Jack.
I just think, without, putting the fall aside for a second, this match could have been an early WWF.
Yeah.
Amongst Doink the Clown and the Honky Tonk Man and all the shit that, the Bushwhackers, the shit that I love.
Except that it's violent, you see.
Violent,
that's the difference.
And this audience, if I said that in front of them, they'd cry.
And then they'd chant ECW.
But I just think it's so fascinating to me how it's such a grey area, such a thin line between those two styles, and yet specifically
this style defines itself as being completely against everything you just said, Joe Graham, and for that we thank you. But yeah, I think that for me as a kid, the coolest thing was a wrestler getting hit with a funny weapon.
Yeah. And
there's a reason why every wrestling figure you bought when you were a kid came with a mop or a road sign or some shit that probably they never even used in wrestling. I had as many gimmicks for my wrestling figures as I did have wrestling figures. And for me, that was the best bit. So New Jack was like having a whole dinner of chicken skin. It's the best bit.
Yeah.
It's not actually very nourishing. It's probably very bad for you
I think
to just watch guys getting hit with these fucking scary weapon shots.
If he had wanted to, I think he could have done a Bushwhackers sellout. I think he could have gone to WWF, and instead of doing all the jumps and the violent stuff, he could have just brought in a bucket of silly weapons, and he just acts with them.
It's funny you mentioned that. It was hard to get footage of it, but in the very early days of TNA, he had a brief run there where he did a series of matches with a guy called Shark Boy, who's kind of a very silly kind of character who dressed up like a shark. And they had the whole gimmick where they'd have the big bag of plunder, but it was all silly stuff like Hulk hands and sleeping bags and all that. So I remember like tuning into TV, like watching TNA, which I fucking loved back then because it's like Ravens, fucking Rhino, all the hardcore ECW guys. And here's New Jack doing kind of really silly gimmicks. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Fuck that. But yeah, he did kind of, but I think
wouldn't be as memorable. Like, he wouldn't have had the icon legacy that he has. But if he'd wanted to go the other way and had an easy, nice career where he'd made probably a bit of money for doing not very much, he could have done it.
I feel there is a route where New Jack could have hit those indies and had, like Cole Cabana always saying, the Honky Tonk Man route, where it's like, hey, just bring out a big bag full of silly bits, hit someone with them, you play the music, and it's fine. You didn't need to get into, like, whatever the fuck it is we're going to talk about starting now, because I feel this side of New Jack all comes with where we get into in late 99, 2000s ECW with the Baldies and all that. But this match was a thumbs up from you.
Oh, absolutely. I love this match. It was really, really good fun.
Fuck yes. So the big one that everyone wants to talk about, other than, of course, the mass transit incident, is what happened with Vic Grimes at Living Dangerously 2000, where we had a big lad who had done some stuff for WWF. He was actually part of Droz's group. He was Key, the evil wrestling drug dealer. He had like one match with WWF. Sent down to ECW for seasoning. And New Jack, of course, was always feuding with the Dudley Boys. When they left for WWF, we had a new group called the Baldies, which was literally just the Dudley Boys, but with bald men.
Really?
They even said, "Thou shalt not fuck with the Baldies." Like, exactly the same gimmick. So New Jack was in a long feud with these guys, beating up all their various members. Had a match with a guy called Vic Grimes. Big dude. And the plan of the match was, we're going to do what we always do with a New Jack match. We're going to take a big fall, but the difference is, Vic, you're going to come with me. The two of us are going to come down together. Now, you've seen the Danbury Fall as it's been known of, because it's where it took place.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of those all-time horrible wrestling bumps.
Yeah, it's really scary.
And this is kind of what happens in those, honestly, can't think of many of these situations where someone's meant to come with you and someone goes, actually, no. And then someone's like, no, we're going to do it anyway. The real life struggle happening before your eyes with gravity being introduced into the mix because Vic decides he doesn't want to take no Danbury Fall.
Way to fucking leave it till the last second.
Now, devil's advocado here for a second, to borrow a Sam Chaplin phrase. But if New Jack is up in the rafters doing cocaine and you're just some fucking jabroni, baldy guy, are you going up to him saying, you know what, Jack, we're not doing that. No way, brother. Like, how do you... And that's the part of the issue with New Jack, is that at this point now, his drug use and his self-delusion about what he is makes it kind of impossible to work with him, brother.
Do you think, though, given that New Jack's entire career is of him doing the fall, not his opponent doing it with him, do you think it was his idea for this guy to come up and do it with him?
It's probably it's a Heyman thing, isn't it?
I think it's Heyman or Vic Grimes being like, hey, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be really badass if I came up with you actually and did it? Oh no, I've changed my mind.
I feel like in wrestling, you have to be, working yourself all the time, particularly in this era where it's all about bravery, balls, bravado. Yeah, I'll go in the tax, even though I don't want to. Yeah, chair shot in the head, even though I don't want to. Or the fire. Even there's so many things that would happen in ECW where I could see the gritted teeth and not the, hell yeah, let's do it. Like, Darby Allin in modern wrestling is such an outlier compared to these people, because I would watch my heroes like Spike Dudley, etc., get violently brutalized, and I could tell they weren't like, yes, wouldn't it be great if you fucking press slam me through 10.
Yeah.
Whereas Darby's like,
Please.
yes, please, I want that. And okie dokie then, Darby, off you go.
I just think that Vic Grimes, if he didn't want to do the spot, he shouldn't have gone up there.
Yeah.
Because
it should have been an ECW, brother.
I think in wrestling you should be able to change your mind. I think, it's like sex or whatever, like consent can be withdrawn. But maybe don't leave it until you're up at the top of that rafter looking down.
Yeah, conversations don't happen up there.
Because you can't come back down again. You can't just walk down after that. You're going to ruin the match.
Now, here's the other devil's advocado situation. If you are a New Jack and you know that you are, A, going first, B, giving up £100 to this guy, and C, barely holding on with kind of a cravat hold at the top.
Yep.
If you think you're coming with me, do you genuinely think that you can tend him with you? Because it feels like in this situation, you should have went, okay, and just let go. Because by trying to pull him, I think we get this absolute disaster of a bump.
He's stupid for pulling him.
I think it's one of, you've gotten some fucking thick skin, my dear, watching wrestling for this show over the years.
Yeah.
And I feel like you were aggressed to an earlier Joe Gray when you saw Vic Grimes, his leg and his back and his ass all land on New Jack's fucking head with the concrete as the pillow underneath.
Died.
It is.
He's lucky to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, neurological damage, lost of sight in his right eye.
Yeah.
Claims he had a sleep disorder afterwards. He never was able to probably sleep ever again after that. I've heard plenty of people being like, well, you took cocaine 10 times a day for fucking 20 years. That probably didn't help much either. But do you think this whole idea, and New Jack has lent into this as well, where it's like, this changed him. This gave him this psychosis. The brain damage made him into this like uncaring, callous customer who kind of couldn't tell what was real, what wasn't real, kind of just became a brutalistic figure in wrestling, where the audience was the furthest thing from his mind, and he was just about inflicting his cruelty upon him. Because again, Dark Side of the Ring, he talks about this and what happens after this with all the joy of someone who's gotten away with some heinous crime laughing on death row,
Probably. I mean, knowing what we do know about neurological damage, it would make sense for it to change him in some way, because it didn't seem to slow him down.
And I mean, he certainly as well, you can make the argument that not even if it's not just this one, but it's like, we saw from the Benoit episode, like, looking into this, the accumulation.
The cumulative damage,
it's night on, night off. Like, you're fucking your brain up with hard drugs.
Yeah.
And then you're adding this into the mix as well.
Yeah.
You know? What was shocking to me is that, you know, people talked about, all the brain damage and stuff he had. We looked at interviews, and that Dark Side of the Ring was like 2 years before he died. There was interviews we watched that were even up until like a year before he died. Seemed like he was sharp as a tack still. Like his ability to speak was not hindered at all. Compared to like Raven, who he's really like struggled, neurologically speaking.
It's so shocking for this podcast seeing the different ways brain damage manifests in different people.
It's not one size fits all at all.
Like Tommy Dreamer, you'd never know he'd taken a chair shot to the head ever in his life.
Whereas other people, like that's the thing you notice about them is, you've had that damage to you.
And that's not to say that means they haven't had damage. They probably do. It's just it maybe manifests in a way that's like less obvious to the public. You know, maybe it doesn't slow down their speech like it has for Mick Foley. Maybe it causes them to have insomnia, as you say, or headaches all the time,
or be more violent,
or maybe be more violent. That's the thing.
It's too complex a thing to kind of. I always understand the desire for a simple explanation for neurological changes or whatnot, but I always shake my head at someone who always says that's a good enough answer in its own right. Yeah. It's just that. Yeah, lots of people don't end up and do these other things, you know.
No.
And on the grand scheme of things, you know, what he does afterwards is something that's also kind of wrapped up in a lot of myth, because with ECW closing, New Jack's not really got a home of sorts, because WCW closes, you know, very shortly thereafter. I don't think that would have been maybe a good fit for him. Certainly WWE never felt like it was going to be a place for New Jack, although he did get a tryout at one point.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, we were reading about it where he got a tryout around the same time as MVP, and he was told his name was up on the board for a dark match. Would have been like kind of 04, 05. He showed up and Dean Malenko said, "Don't say anything to Vince McMahon." And then he saw Vince and said, "Hey boss, thanks for the opportunity."
Because that's what you're told to do. Is if you
shake hands,
you see anyone, you meet them, you introduce yourself, you shake their hand.
And then he saw his name was written off the board, and he left. Now I heard other people say that he did actually get to, like, you know, they had him run a few spots in the ring before show. He didn't get a dark match, but he did get a tryout.
Right, yeah.
But it's kind of feels like wrestling was changing. It was something I didn't like about the Dark Side of the Ring, was they were like, and the appetite for extreme wrestling was just getting more and more and more. And it's like, no, once 2001 came and went, you did have a CZW and you did have Tournaments of Death and deathmatch wrestling, but it wasn't like there was an insatiable appetite for the audience for that. Maybe there was an insatiable appetite for performers and weekend warriors to do that, but find me a show that was doing this deathmatch wrestling that had more than 1,000 people. I think he'd struggle to find a show that had even half of that. So he's not into this world where, hey, we need more and more violence. He was into this world where they were like, I don't know, we'll put on a show, I guess.
Well, apparently XPW, the promoter...
Oh, he's a bad man,
Yeah,
Joe.
He's a piece of shit from what I've heard.
That's XPW is a whole episode in of itself that, I'll be honest, I don't really want to do.
No.
Because XPW was the version of ECW that was trying to, like, you know, they would send people to ECW shows and be like, you're all pussies, you're not real hardcore. XPW is the real... Like, just kind of trying to mimic and just be a fringe version. It's, for those of you who are early YouTube adopters, they are the irate gamer to the angry Nintendo nerd.
Oh.
A cheap facsimile that was at best knocking them off. Shout out James Rolfe, get it done. Anyway, we then go to XPW for our next match, where they decide the best thing in the world to do is to perhaps capitalize off the message board fire that is the Vic Grimes New Jack incident and the Danbury Fall, and they present their pay-per-view Free Fall, which guarantees someone is going to fall off the highest structure ever erected in wrestling history, 40 feet tall. Joe, I want to thank you for watching this match with me and having the curious insight of not a brain-dead wrestling fan like me, because I heard the story year after year. New Jack got in this match with Vic Grimes, and he decided to kill that man. Yeah, of course.
That
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Because of what happened to Danbury Fall, right?
Because it would be good for his career, and he'd get booked loads if he was in prison. Hang on, I'm realising now.
No. Because Vic Grimes didn't want to fall off this structure. You see,
right?
Wait a minute. What's the pay-per-view called again?
Yeah,
Free Fall. Okay, and the match is it's a 40 feet scaffold match.
Oh.
So we actually watched this entire match as opposed to, watching the GIF that you probably saw. I mean, I remember seeing this video
It's a cool GIF.
Yeah, I saw this on E-Bombs World back in the day,
I
man.
bet.
The big fall. I downloaded this accidentally when I was downloading an ECW pack and included the name Own Heart Fall brackets real.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The good old days of LimeWire. But this is New Jack versus Vic Grimes in a scaffold match from Free Fall in 2002. I don't know what's sadder, this match happening to begin with, or this piss poor, teeny tiny, minuscule audience rattling around in the only building seemingly large enough to contain the 40-foot structure.
I'll tell you what's even sadder than either of those things. New Jack isn't even pretending to work in an office with a keyboard anymore.
No.
He's not miming with any of these weapons.
No music, no fun.
No.
New Jack apparently is in kayfabe promised to quit wrestling if he loses this match. The crowd is silent. When Vic Grimes comes out, the crowd is also silent.
Apparently it's 1 a.m.
That was the thing where I was like, fuck off. 1 a.m.
Come off it.
And the commentators, who are relentlessly shy,
oh, they're so bad. I could do a better job.
We've been here for 6 hours, folks. It's now 1 a.m. because we were all too scared to ask anyone how long their match should be. 1 a.m. I got a pop early doors with this simply because Vic Grimes had a Wolverine claw made out of pizza cutters.
That was pretty cool.
Which, let's be honest, folks, you've cut a pizza at home. They're not that sharp.
Well, you say that. Apparently, New Jack's deepest scar on his forehead, because we haven't mentioned this, but for those who've never seen a picture of New Jack, he's got a really mangled forehead.
He's got the Dusty Rhodes forehead.
Worse.
Abdullah the Butcher, Steve Corino, New Jack, they're all in that conversation.
He alleges that Abdullah the Butcher's forehead was fake.
For fuck's sake!
Not fake as in, synthetic, but he says that it was
you
fake.
ran out of ribs, Abby.
Medically done, apparently, under anaesthesia.
Fuck's sake.
It's such a honky-tonk man lie.
Not even a fork, it's a spoon. It's a spoon.
But apparently New Jack's deepest scar was from a pizza cutter. So
okay.
maybe they sharpen them.
Maybe they do. Maybe it's a different day and age.
Maybe.
EU regulations didn't reach all the way to XPW Freefall. New Jack there's kind of a joylessness, I guess, in the match. I think you pointed out later, there's not kind of a, hey, I've got the gimmick. We're rushing through gimmicks just to use them. Everyone's
it's literally
tired.
Just pick up object, hit. Pick up object, hit. There's no showmanship with it anymore.
Seeing how unengaged this crowd is, and we're not that far away from the ECW era. In my mind, in 2002, if you told me, hey, guess what, Kevin, we're going to have a big crazy show full of all the ECW wrestlers, and they're all going to do even more violent stuff. I'm like, yeah. And everyone here is I think realizing they don't like this much.
Yeah.
And you can't just transplant an atmosphere from one promotion to another. You can't just make ECW happen with the people and the kind of the backdrop of hardcore wrestling.
Especially not in 2002, I don't think.
Particularly as well, Joe, watching these types of shows with an unengaged audience, and none of them have phones. So they're all literally just stood there, either looking at the ground or looking straight on
Wish I had a phone. Wish an iPhone had been invented already.
I've already beaten Space Impact twice. The announcers don't really know what to do with themselves, particularly when liquid is doused on New Jack and they go, no! That distilled water all over. Both men start climbing, and I do mean climbing because the majority of this match is them trying to make their way up to the top.
Exhausting.
Dirty scaffolding as well.
Yeah, it's really rusty and it's been left out in the rain.
The further up and up they go, it's kind of like... I don't know, it's kind of playing a game like Flappy Bird or whatever, where the further meters you've got, the background, you go from there's some uninterested people, then there's sparse people, then there's clouds, and then there's empty seats, and they're up basically in the fucking ceiling lights of this building, and they both look fucking petrified to be there.
Yeah, they do.
Now, the story of what happens here now from New Jack is he goes, I got a stun gun with 350 volts in it.
Wait, is it a stun gun or a taser?
He said a stun gun.
I thought it was a taser.
Well, stun gun, taser. These words are used interchangeably, but they are in fact very different things. And I stuck him with it in the head. And he goes, Jack, no. And he goes,
I can't feel my legs.
I can't feel my legs. And he goes, well, you're going to need your legs. Bombs away. And then I fucking threw him over. And I
did it on purpose to try and kill him.
I tried to hit him outside the ring. I tried to hit him in the
so
post.
So he wouldn't land on those carefully balanced
It's 12 tables in the middle of the ring.
Because that would make, again, it'd be really good wrestling to miss the main spot of the whole night.
And of course, as well, that was it. Like, obviously, we didn't want this to happen because the pay-per-view free fall was going to end with what? A pinfall on top of the scaffolding or whatever it was.
They're going to climb back down again, that's all.
So what happens here is he takes out a box that goes... Looks kind of like what Scott Hall hit Goldberg with at Starrcade that one time.
Makes a loud noise, looks kind of blue.
And then and the crowd, I will say, pop of the match.
The crowd are dead until this moment.
Till the taser comes out, the crowd goes wild. And he hits him and he goes... Whoa!
And his arms and legs are like waving around. He is proper selling it.
Like, if you have ever thought, like, what would happen if The Mask from the movie The Mask got hit with a taser? That's how Vic Grimes sells it.
Like
and I was like, I'm a fucking idiot. I've got a degree.
Aww.
I've got a degree in biology. And I was like, yep, par for the course. All works here. Even though I have watched Russian men being hit with tasers on YouTube since I was 18 years old, Joe. There was a guy who got hit with a taser and he sounded like Chewbacca and he goes, and then a Russian man goes, ha, like Chewbacca. So you at this point were like, hang on a minute. And before we get into the end of the match here, folks, what happens with Vic Grimes and the tables, looked up a lot of videos, and there are a lot of videos.
I don't know what my algorithm knows what I like, I guess, which is I like watching training videos of police getting tasered.
Yes.
Because part of your training, if you're going to use a taser or a stun gun, you have to take one so you know what it feels like and when to stop using it for safety reasons.
And this is what happens when your wife has got an algorithm determined by her interests in lockpicking and opening and playing with butterfly knives. Don't worry, it's a practice one I got her. The baby is fine.
But yeah, you see a variety of reactions depending on if it's a stun gun or a taser, and also depending on the voltage. But
taser is usually when the two lines get shot into you and the current goes through there.
So I thought that was the stun gun.
But the stun gun is just the thing on its own where it's like, I get you here.
Between it.
I'm sure there's people who will call them the other way around.
Yeah.
It's what, there's a catch-all term, people call them tasers.
Yeah, but anyway, besides the point, there's two main reactions you get. There's the one where everything locks up, or their muscles contract, and they just go still.
Yeah.
And they go zzz.
They sometimes even take a bump.
They don't take a bump, no.
You've seen it in Jackass, folks, right?
It's kind of anticlimactic. It wouldn't make for a good wrestling match, because you wouldn't see any movement. Yeah. It's the opposite of selling.
It's a lack of movement, yeah.
And then the other reaction is they go, bleh, and they involuntarily have to move away.
Yeah, the body literally shoots
from the taser,
away from it, yeah. You don't sit there with moving your arms legs going, everyone in the back, I'm getting tasered.
No.
So it's a fake taser. And I know wrestling fans don't like to admit this, but I remember when you and I, there was an episode we actually watched some death matches. I think it was for Moxie and all that. And literally hearing them be like, it's not a real weed whacker. It's obviously fucking...
Yeah.
I'm not an idiot.
You don't need to use a real one.
I'm working here, folks. And yeah, do you need to get a real stun gun? No. Does it get a pop? Yes. Did Vic Grimes get hit with a stun gun? Not in a million fucking years. Not in a million years. But does it fit into the story because of what happens next? Yes. Because they're off center. He sends them over. And Vic Grimes, he does a tumble. He flips.
Yeah, he kind of spins a little bit.
They'd never been up that high before. That is genuinely the highest. That's 40 feet.
Yeah,
legit.
So scary.
And what happens here, folks, is because Vic Grimes, who's a good 350, he flips and starts turning. And because he turns...
There's like an arc.
There's an arc. Remember your physics,
fall.
folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? Because of the slight turn that sends him off course and he goes further than he should, the legs hit the ropes with the back. The leg and his back hit the top ropes. He only hits like 2 or 3 tables.
He hits,
and he bounces
slides
back.
Down the tables.
It's a fucking horrifying fall, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, no, it's fucking hot. Yeah, it's nightmarish.
But the only bad thing that happens to him is that when the bounce happens and he goes backwards, his ankle clips the ropes on the other side and he breaks his ankle there.
I think he dislocated it.
He dislocated, but there was nothing happened to his back, his neck, everything was fine, and which is actually shocking considering how scary. And the announcer commentary just goes, like he properly gives a full-on Jerry Lawler puppies scream, like he's so fucking perturbed by it. But this idea that New Jack purposely threw him off.
No, he tased him first.
Sorry, tased him. Tased him and incapacitated him, and then somehow threw a 350-pound man way further. Get out of here.
I like the idea as well in a show called Freefall, where they have to do this spot off 40 feet of scaffolding. They're like, but you know what would really make it good is if we brought an actual taser.
Yeah, right.
We really need that on top of the 40-foot fall.
What you have here is happenstance, because Vic Grimes, inexplicably, I'm saying this for a man who's endured some of the worst bumps I've ever fucking seen on wrestling, is the luckiest man in wrestling.
Oh my god, yeah.
Because by virtue of how he was falling...
That rope's, I mean...
It should have snapped.
It should have snapped. It should have snapped his neck.
He should have fell over, yeah.
But instead it saved his life.
It did, yeah.
It's a horrible fall.
It's horrible. It was like, if you went through all the tables in the middle, they were trying to do the Tommy Dreamer, Brian Lee thing from ECW back in the day.
Spectacular explosion of tables.
But ever the worker, and again, no more than the justifiable homicides claim and all of that. There's times where I think New Jack genuinely believes he hit the man with a tape. Because is there nothing but hate in his heart when he's talking about Vic Grimes? Absolutely. Of course he hates Vic Grimes, and he resented him.
And he wanted revenge of some kind.
And he wanted revenge.
Yeah.
And he took a horrible fucking nasty landing, and he got to add a little bit to the story. And never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So it is all of the above. It is a work, but it is one of the nastiest falls in wrestling. And it was designed to be. The pay-per-view was set up around the idea that you were going to see one of the worst bumps in wrestling.
Yeah.
And it was, but just slightly different from what was intended. And certainly not a man getting tasered for real. And listen to you now, wrestling fan at home. Oh, everything is fake in wrestling, but that one thing, that's the
I feel bad. Are we being killjoys?
I've killed my own joy.
Oh.
But it's like, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still one of the wildest bumps ever.
Piece by piece, dismantling the legacy of New Jack.
But he's still horrible and dangerous, you know?
That's it, okay.
And all those things are still true.
The character of New Jack did have a taser that worked.
Yeah, of course.
It was real.
But he's not real.
And he did try and kill that man for some reason.
I just think that because of who he was and who he was working with, did he care that this guy nearly got killed? Absolutely not.
No, I don't, yeah.
Did he care about his... Well, of course not, but it doesn't mean that he had a real taser. It's just the real taser thing is what, like, and he fucking swears up and down.
Well, because at the end of the match, he goes up to Vic Grimes and he says, "There's your receipt." Like, the guy knows how to work a spot.
Yeah. But
he knows how to keep a cool head when things go wrong.
That lived on, Joe, and was taught. And my friends who are all wrestling fans and who I used to hang out with and watch wrestling with or whatever, did we talk about, remember Heatwave 96? Or do you remember when he won the tag titles with Mustafa in the triple threat? Or do you remember him teaming with John Cronus? Or do you remember this match with this guy or that? No. This was it, and this was his legacy.
Yeah.
This was the thing that and this is 02. This is like one of the foundational pillars of wrestling lore online, what people would talk about and share, because it was a dirty, greasy show and something horrible happened that wasn't meant to happen. And this kind of became a large, if not the largest, cornerstone of his legacy. And the reason why I'm happy to review this match with you, as opposed to the other ones where like I'm not going to watch and review Gypsy Joe's, because this is meant to fucking happen. It's not meant to happen like that, but someone's going to go off a scaffold and someone's going to pretend to get hit with a taser.
Yeah.
But how is it as a match? Because
like awful.
It ends with like the crowd are kind of all sad as the guy being like, "Guy, we have to leave the building. So if you don't can leave the building now. There's an ambulance coming. So thank you. Visit xpw.com for more information. Buy some really bad porn while you're there."
Yeah. Great. No, this is a boring match. I hate that. That's my conclusion for this. Like a 40-foot fall is boring. But you know what? It would have gotten a bigger pop from me if they'd just done a bit of miming. If he'd done a bit of miming with the keyboard and with the Hoover.
But there can't be joy there because he's meant to be wanting to kill this man, you see. You know? But he's meant to be wanting to kill Mustafa in kayfabe as well. But I think that's where he let the real take over, in that he hated Vic Grimes so much, I don't think he even wanted to give him that bit of like entertainment value or whatever in the match. So, you know, yeah.
I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It's not good. I wouldn't recommend people watch it.
It's borderline snuff.
You may as well just watch the bit that the fall.
Which you probably have if you're a wrestling fan. You've probably seen that. Like,
yeah,
you
at
know?
least it's like, unlike the mass transit incident, which is, I think, has a really sad conclusion of, you know, permanent nerve damage, and then eventually the boy dies of, you know, something completely unrelated. It's a bit dark to watch that, and very hard to watch. Whereas this, at least, yeah, it's hard to watch in the fact that it's scary, but it's like everything that could have gone right in a way did. He is so lucky. He's so lucky that it's I feel miracle it went that well.
I oddly felt more okay watching this than the Danbury fall.
Yeah.
With Vic Grimes falling on him, because that felt like so not what was meant to happen.
Yeah.
And unlike this one where it was not meant to happen, that was not meant to happen with severe consequences.
No, yeah, this is like, it's like God himself is like shining a light on Vic Grimes and like, protecting you from absolute certain death. I'm amazed.
Wait a minute, God's one of the Baldies! No! DeVito gave him the money!
Even if he'd gone through all those tables, I don't think there's any guarantee that man would be alive and walking to like.
I think it's the top rope is what did it, baby.
I think it was the slide of the tables.
Yeah.
He went off the corner of each of the last three. So it was like it slowed him down so much. And then, as you say, the ropes. I think it was all of those factors together saved that man's life.
Are you saying, Joe, that the closer Vic Grimes was to danger, the further he was from harm?
Almost, yeah.
Well, New Jack then finds himself in a radically altered world of wrestling, decimated from the explosion of two of the three main companies, not fitting into the likes of Ring of Honor, which was trying to get its roots going in the early 2000s. And I do believe he made like the odd appearance here or there for a bunch of different indies, but I felt that CZW, because there was such a hyper focus on everyone being so violent, he could no longer be the standout violent guy. So he ends up just kind of bouncing around from promotion to promotion, doing drugs and doing small, like the Gypsy Joe thing. Gypsy Joe is a wrestler who was known for being the oldest wrestler in the world, who I think at the time that he fought him was like 69 or whatever it was still wrestling into his 80s.
New Jack, of course, says that he's 100 years
100
old.
years old. And like, I remember watching this on E-Bounds World with my buddy Paddy our first weekend in Galway when we moved to university, and I was like, that's not fun. Like, I remember like, crazy New Jack clip on New that's not fun. And it's just like, it felt like, and that's the thing about a lot of these other instances with No More Than This or him and Hunter Red. He's just beating a guy up for real.
I kind of feel for him though, because the circumstances do matter.
Yeah, circumstances are Gypsy Joe's gimmick is, I don't sell, you can't hurt me.
I don't sell. And also he came up to New Jack beforehand and was like, I invented hardcore actually, and I could teach you a few things. And then he headbutts New Jack for real. And I just think
the quickness with which it escalates into a fight just shows you. It's like, well, here's a fucking lad who's got brain damage and he's on fucking coke, and he's like, here's the thing I don't think New Jack will ever admit to, but a lot of these like other incidents, now this and the Hunter Red thing and all that, and all the other kind of, you know, grotty stuff where he's in these like really tiny fucking rooms, you gotta be pissed off. You're in front of no one.
And
like.
the people who are there in this instance are all chanting the N-word at him.
So
like
what
Jesus Christ, come on.
What good is this doing anyone? So I think like it's another just fucking heinous situation where a really fucked up lad is just unleashed against another fucked up lad, and it just feels like you're watching like how this is, anyone could view this as like being like kind of like could have been construed as entertainment, because there's like other stuff, like even comparing it to the mass transit incident, which is like basically snuff. It's like, well, you can see kind of this vaguish idea of wrestlers trying to do something. This isn't for anyone who's in an audience, and this is just like two lads got into a fight at a bar type of a thing. And the Hunter Red thing as well.
The Hunter Red thing is
this is fucked up and kind of reveals a side of wrestling that I just fucking despise, which is like, who are you doing this for? And I say this to both Hunter Red and New Jack and the promoter.
Well, okay, so I read about the Hunter Red thing. I was shocked.
Give us an overview of it, because this one I didn't know before we saw the Dark Side of the Ring. Because I think, honestly, as a fan, when I was in my 20s, whatever, by the time I saw the Gypsy Joe thing, I was like, I don't think I like New Jack anymore.
Yeah.
With the dubbed tapes and the kind of the snuff movies, I was like, yeah I think what I had when I was 13 is maybe gone now.
So with the Hunter Red thing, before the match, he told New Jack that he only gets colour the hard way.
Nice.
Failed already immediately. Don't say that to New Jack.
You're somehow too stupid for wrestling.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
That's the other thing. He also said that he had been wrestling a hardcore style for years in Florida. Yeah, I've got a girlfriend, but she's in Florida. You don't know her.
She's from 2 Floridas over.
Yeah.
Actually, my uncle works for Florida, and he's
Yeah.
saying the new girlfriends are hotter than ever.
And when he had a chat with New Jack, and New Jack tried to kind of like work with him about what they were going to do, New Jack quickly realised that Hunter Red actually didn't know what any of the wrestling terms meant. Not even the word kayfabe.
How did he get to be a wrestler?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Put Ricky Steamboat on his back, make him run up and down some fucking flights of stairs and see if you want to be a wrestler then, mister.
Yeah.
I'm so kayfabe, I don't even know what it is.
So immediately he comes across as this kind of like Mark who doesn't know anything about wrestling but knows enough to know that he wants to get it the hard because he's like Mr. fucking tough. Then he's really uncooperative in the match. He keeps hitting New Jack for real. He keeps stiffing him in the back of the head, which is dangerous.
I feel when you're telling these stories now, you're more sympathetic to New Jack than I am. Because you feel like you're almost giving an excuse for him to do what he's doing. Because I feel there's no excuse for what he does.
I'm not sympathetic to him.
Because he stabs the guy here, and I'm like, there's no excuse for that.
I have no
if someone
sympathy.
stiffs you, stiff him back. You don't need a blade.
Yeah, no, I have no sympathy for him.
I'm just intrigued, I guess. You know.
No, I am defending him slightly. Not in terms of what he does, but I do think the context matters. I think in terms of
Hunter Red's not an entirely innocent party in this, I guess.
he doesn't. It's not like he doesn't know who New Jack is. That you're getting into the ring with a fucking probably a psychopath. Like maybe don't hit him for real in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Maybe don't take liberties with someone who will probably hit try and.
Do you think
even if you buy kayfabe, right? He's gonna kill you.
Do you think, and this is another devil's avocado position that I'm taking, counsellor, is it in some respects with guys like this where, I've heard all these stories about him, I bet he's not that tough.
Probably.
No more so than the wrestlers in the bar in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
I heard this lad's meant to be fucking tough. Let's see if he is for real. And now you have the wrestlers as opposed to the patrons in the bar. It's the wrestlers themselves who, in many respects, these small-time wrestlers are more marks than the good old boys in the saloon back in the 60s and 70s trying to fight the phony wrestler they see on TV. Is this him trying to okay, let's see how tough you actually are. It's the very fact that you have this reputation that you say, Joe, that you should be careful about. That is, in fact, the very reason that I'm going to stiff you to see what you're going to do about it if you're this fucking tough guy.
But why then do this whole thing of I only get colour the hard way? Why stiff
Because
someone?
I'm tough.
Why stiff someone and then give them the tools with which to hurt you really badly in a legal way?
It just shows this fucking death spiral of tragic markness that hardcore wrestling found itself in the mid-2000s, because there is no showmanship. And that was I think one of the early things you asked me particularly when the Hunter Red thing came up, you were like, is using the blade, is that kind of a gimmick? Because we thought, there was a fake taser, is it a gimmick? And I'm like, well, let's look at the footage. We did see the footage, and it's like, he's not holding up that blade for everyone to see.
No, it's not working.
It's not for anyone. It's like you actually have to kind of really zoom in and be like, see right there, he's almost not wanting the audience to see it. It
feels almost like where he's like, he gets him in a headlock first, and then he starts stabbing him almost to push him away at the same time.
How did you get here? But
that's it.
You were on TV a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, he has a knife in his pocket, which already I think is why are you carrying that around?
So he ends up basically getting arrested after this match because of the stabbing, and the promoter, someone rings up the police, and they basically described it as because they're in the fucking Hyatt hotel, they're like, a black man just stabbed a white man in the Hyatt Regency or whatever. Cops come armed, get on the ground, take it away, serious assault charge. He's sent to prison. Yeah. And this is the wrinkle of the story that blew my fucking mind and made me despondent at what wrestling was. And Jesus Christ, I hope, if anything, wrestling has moved on at least a little bit away from this.
Well, it makes me think, what happens next? It makes me think, I wonder if the stabbings were... Because stabbing is bad, yes, obviously, but we are talking about...
I'm glad someone finally said it, Joe.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm very brave. But we are talking about here specifically a style of wrestling in an industry that is inherently violent, where, we were talking about CCW earlier, and there are stabbings. It is difficult to kind of...
With cooperation, though, Joe, when someone's like,
But
hey, gig me, like...
He said he only gets colour the hard way. How is that not... I think you could argue that is getting colour the hard way. Now, is it
That's
a
generous defence, I think,
Is
Joe.
it like, kind of like the way some kids would get stabbed with pencils
But he
in
stabbed
school?
him all over, though. He didn't
Yeah?
stab him in the head. I think that's taking liberties. And that's
Of course
just
it's taking liberties, but like, how do you argue that, though?
But him showing up to New Jack in prison, and he's like, oh my God, we got all this heat, all this publicity on TV. Tell you what, I'll drop the charges. We'll work the Florida
That's
circus.
it. Like, I don't think you'd do that if it was really bad injuries, would you? Because you'd be fucking traumatized. You'd be like, I don't want to go anywhere near that guy ever again. He's fucking scary.
Or perhaps the smartest thing that New Jack has done in his career is he takes the man up on the offer and then leaves Florida.
Runs away.
I think the rest of his time in wrestling is kind of punctuated with... I mean, we've not hit every sad story or every scummy thing that he's done. There's loads of incidents of like kind of people having liberties taken at small events or stuff like that. I think one that really fucking was horrible, he was briefly in a relationship with Terry Runnels. If you remember Terry from the Goldust episode?
Yeah, because she's had a hard go of it.
Yeah, and they were in this kind of like inexplicable, like, wow, those two together? Like, you know, showed up at wrestling conventions together, and then like once they broke up, he like leaked loads of, you know, intimate photos of her, stuff like that.
I think he sold them. Which is
yeah,
even
he
worse.
did. And it's like an utter depth of scumminess.
Scumbag.
And then there was like, you know, a lot of he kind of hit that kind of same loop that, you know, it would be like, you know, Honky Tonk Man, New Jack, these kind of lads who'd be doing the shoot interviews, saying the controversial things. He spoke, you know, a lot during the Benoit tragedy and stuff like that on those kind of, you know, shoot interview circuits and all that. But a lot of it was him kind of either trying to embellish, maintain, or in the case when in the, you know, the late 2010s when he got into stand-up comedy, trying to kind of sweep away or rectify that legacy. He was always kind of... If you look at it, who's perpetrating all these myths about New Jack or telling all these different stories? Well, folks, he didn't have a whole army. It was him.
Yeah.
It wasn't the New Jack Street team. It was him saying one thing and then doing another. And unlike the Honky Tonk Man who's talking shit about other people and other things that he'd heard, New Jack was talking about himself and what he did. And he's a man who has probably turned as many of our fans who've tweeted in off of him because of the glee, the joy, the sadism that he expresses in so many interviews about all these horrible things that he's done.
Yeah.
Because if he's gotten away with it, ha 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 ha. And like, you know, earlier on we're like kind of going, wow, you know, the fun story of a kid robbing something, or a fun story of a young wrestler going out there in Smoky Mountain and putting his fucking ass on the line and saying crazy shit and getting away with it. That thrill of kind of getting away with it, I can't tell you what the firm line is or whatever, but there's several lines that he crosses over and over again. Even if you take away the embellishments and his recontextualizing to try and make it seem more badass or whatever it is, it's kind of a weird legacy that has been left at a point because of, I think, that dark side of the ring. That's the last loudest shot that people will probably hear about him, and I think everything else, including this podcast, is kind of playing catch up to try and change anyone's mind, because that's what they've heard. So that's it then.
Yeah.
But in terms of legacy, here's a weird one for you folks. We love playing 2K25 in this house, and I still can't quite believe that New Jack is there in 2K25, and his family members are getting a check from WWE and 2K because of his legacy.
I think it just shows how scummy wrestling is, really.
You're
making money from the legacy of a man who committed various crimes by taking liberties in ring. I don't know, I just think that goes against the ethos of the WWE now, with like being this whole like corporation, I should say, which is about safety and about consent and doing things the right way, and we look after our performers, and then it's like...
you know that Brock Lesnar is in that, right?
Well, no, I know, I'm just saying... It's just another layer of their hypocrisy.
Yeah, and they wear it a little bit kind of on the sleeve now. But here's the reason. I was trying to look up, like, why did this even happen? Guess who was a massive fan of New Jack back in the day and thinks he's really cool and wants to see him included in a lot more WWE merchandising and products and licensing agreements because he's got such a cool reputation, and amongst, you know, reams of young people who think New Jack is really fucking cool because of the same reasons I did. They see cool clips. He's all over TikTok, all that jazz. Nick Khan, Joe.
What?
Nick Khan is one of the biggest New Jack. He apparently went to the 2K offices and said, you have got to put New Jack in this game. He's cool. He's a legend among the young people. He's really fucking awesome. He's like a part of the old style of wrestling that, like, or the old guard of wrestling that, like, young fans want to see now because he's viral. New Jack, the OJ promo goes viral like once a month on Instagram or YouTube Shorts, TikTok. He's all over it.
I'm glad it's that goes viral and not like the incidents from his career.
That part as well, because that kind of wrestling and true crime are kind of like they're kind of slightly bonded. But New Jack is simultaneously less of what you thought he was and more of it at the same time as well.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like we talked about like 10 years of kind of... We talked about kind of like 7 or 8 years of kind of like the glory years or whatever it is. And then I feel like there's like 15, 20 years of like horrible shit. So I think of the lion's share of things, even though, and I do not exaggerate this, I think he is one of the most compelling interviews and promos in wrestling.
He is that, yeah.
I feel like in many ways, this episode for me as a young fan of his when I was a kid, it kind of feels like, all right, that ship's gone off to sea. I have a newfound appreciation for him in some ways, but I kind of feel like I'm putting my fandom to bed in other respects as well.
I get that.
Where do you end up here, Joe, in this episode with the very complex and extremely controversial legacy of New Jack?
I don't really know how to explain where I sit with him, because it's not like I have to separate the art from the artist, because it's intertwined. Like, the stuff he did as a wrestler is, I think, really his most evil things he's done. And they kind of became more evil, I think, as he got older. You
don't have those two parts of the fandom like I did, the before and the after. You get to see all this top down, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's slightly easier for me. Like, I think he's a scumbag. I think
you wouldn't be rushing to defend him if someone was like, fuck that guy.
Depends what they were saying about that, I guess.
It's not as simple.
I don't think he needs defending most of the time, but I think my only frustration was coming into this was seeing kind of how black and white a lot of people, I think, give his legacy, which is online. If you see comments on YouTube and stuff, it's either people being like, "He's the baddest motherfucker ever. He's so cool," and it's like, well, he's not really like, okay, in some ways, like if you just take his character, I guess, it's
cool, cool,
but like, they're sounding too much like Alan Partridge in the Day to Day. Is this cool? Stabbing a man, is that cool? Like, that's not cool, and don't stab people. But also, it's like, the other end of that is people being like, well, he's just, he's a piece of shit, like, outright. And people taking what he says at face value, which I understand, because sometimes that's all you've got to go on, is him being like, yeah, I meant to almost kill Eric Koulas. And
my only regret is that I didn't kill him sooner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also I meant to do all that shit to Vic Grimes and Hunter Red. And it's like, well, some of that I believe. I believe that he, you don't accidentally stab a man 9 times. Like, that's on purpose. But also, I think some of what he did was just an accident, and he's had to cover up for that with his own gimmick, because it's more badass to be like, yep, totally meant to do that, yep, absolutely. And then you see in random interviews where he breaks down and cries because someone mentions him having a girlfriend that's stuck by him, and you're like, oh, that's a man who carries a lot on his shoulders.
And there's a man as well who I think you see, no more than the honky tonk man, trying to pivot to the changing world of communications, of like of how you can work the marks, as it were, so to speak, us included. And I think you've seen that over, like, particularly that 05 to 2020-ish period, how his kind of handling of his own legacy seemed to change almost on a daily basis. I don't think it's as simple as saying, he's crazy, and that's that.
No, but he certainly is. I mean, but he's also not. It's interesting, because you see him talking about it sometimes.
I think there's a very fractured personality.
That's it. I think he has kind of segmented his own brain in a lot of respects.
Siloed himself a little bit, yeah, for sure. I kind of feel like I'm happy that people like New Jack aren't in wrestling in some respects, because I think the less that wrestling is kind of a catharsis for people who have, like, extremely violent tendencies is probably better for wrestling.
Yeah.
But as a kid who was brought up with, like, authenticity, like, this is real, this is hardcore, that's not hard, no, that's not real, that's not authentic, those guys are pussies, these guys are real. Is there kind of something, like, I hear people, often older fans, complaining all the time that we don't have these genuine articles anymore. Do we miss someone like a New Jack in modern wrestling?
I mean, I'm sure some fans do. I don't. I think
I'd like to find someone who could just play one on TV, maybe.
That's it. I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
Because I don't think John Moxley is a fucking, like, he's got all these violent elements of his persona, but I wouldn't think for a second that I would worry about him being that for real,
No.
I don't know. It's strange to say, People like their throwbacks, but I think we want throwbacks to allude to types of people. We don't want those actual fucking sadists in wrestling, do we?
That's it. And I think it's kind of cool in a way to have a character like him who you don't know what's real and what's not.
He's one of the most
so wrestling.
He's one of the most wrestling as fuck wrestlers we've ever covered, which says a lot, seeing as for most of the footage we've watched, he was in fact not actually wrestling.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, an interesting, complex look at an interesting, complex individual. Let's have a look at your tweets, your Patreon posts, etc. about New Jack. Right, time to look into some of your comments coming to us from X, Blue Sky, where of course you can follow us, Facebook, and don't forget patreon.com/howtowrestling, where you can of course drop in your 2 cents as well and also get access to a whole load of pay-per-view reviews, AEW, WWE, and even some pay-per-view classic. Most recently, we delved into WCW Uncensored 1996. Joe, I'm sorry. So we've got some kind of polarized thoughts here, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just case in point, it's been like a day or two between the main part of the episode and this bit, and I think I entered that last part being like, I think the sun is setting or the ship is sailing on my New Jack fandom. And in the couple of days since, I'm like, oh, fucking hell. I drew loads of pictures of New Jack and Mustafa. I don't know. It's not. I think there's a lot of people who will probably perhaps dwell on this and come away hating him and then liking him again, or maybe some people will come away from this liking him and then think about it for a little bit and hate him all over again.
Yeah, definitely, I could see that.
How are you at this point in time?
I stand by my thoughts from earlier. Really, I think this guy is a scumbag, and I think he's like a slight genius when it comes to working people and tiptoeing around the idea of kayfabe and shoot.
Yeah, definitely. I think in another generation or another era, he might have been praised as an out-and-out genius, particularly with regards to the little amount of work rate he had to do as well at the same time.
Well, that brings us on to our very first comment from Mr. Samuel Scratch. New Jack understood the assignment of being a pro wrestling heel more deeply than most, and people who purported to be impossible to offend showed just how sensitive they could be. The man nearly started riots just by cutting promos about the news. I'm of the belief that if something like the mass transit incident happened in the 70s and it was Harley Race or Stan Hansen carving up some new kid's forehead for daring to tell them how to work a match, it would be the unequivocal favourite story for the likes of JBL, Jim Cornette and Michael Hayes.
I can literally hear Conrad and be like, chat me up about when Vern Gagne carved up that kid because he wanted him to get him colour. What was that all about? What was that bit of business?
I don't think that justifies his actions, but if his behaviour in the 90s was appalling and dangerous, it says a lot about those good old days so many of the good old boys want to return to. And it says a lot about the double standard he was constantly being held to.
I think when you are at simultaneous points kind of ahead of your time, but also a throwback, I think you're going to get that kind of overlap of people giving you kind of undue criticism that you would have been praised for previously. Because I think the people they mentioned there, I would very much say that would be the long line of respected legends and veterans in the business who even in the late 90s, early 90s would have been like, yeah, what he's doing is too far, that's bad, that's sick, etc. And yet at the same time, oh baby, if it was Wahoo McDaniel doing it or one of the old boys, yeah, I totally get that hypocrisy right there. That must be quite frustrating, I think, for a lot of his fans.
I don't, as a newer fan, I don't know those stories. So is that a case? You'd say there is a double standard going on between that generation?
I certainly wouldn't say I've got a list here of Harley Race did this exact thing, but it just I guess the notion that kind of that ethos. I guess a little bit it was in the kind of the Bushwhackers stories when we were going through there of kind of what was revered as being like, oh, these odds are good stock, or this is the kind of the fun Wild West of wrestling versus perhaps a few decades later that is viewed to a different standard and often by the same people. So I think it's one thing if you're held to different standards by different generations. We see that all the time. There's a lot of people, under the age of 30 who think that Ric Flair is just out and out scumbag and want nothing to do with him. But I think New Jack is an interesting case because, as Samuel has pointed out there, he's receiving that often from the same generation, it feels like. People who are praising very similar actions or vibes from other folks hold him down for it. I think, generally speaking, we're all better off without criminality in wrestling as it is, but a really interesting perspective there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Next up from Keka, one of the wrestlers I legitimately can't stand. If you brag about attempting to kill people in the ring, you're a piece of shit. It doesn't matter if he lied to seem tougher, it's still absolute scumbag behaviour, and the fact he still had a career just speaks to how shit the business used to be.
I mean, that's kind of like encapsulated what I think, a lot of people's thoughts on New Jack are, you know?
I'm surprised we didn't get more people with that kind of opinion.
I do think there's a lot of folks who view the kind of New Jack as like, I won't engage with that. It's kind of, they view it in that light, and therefore they won't engage and they don't want to give it the time of day or whatever it is. But I do think that is an opinion that is shared by a large portion of the wrestling fan base. However, I do kind of wonder if it's like, that's the weird crossroads then where you're like kind of, oh, well, you're just being worked then. But it's like, well, clearly this person here has shown that if like New Jack was on a card or being advertised, they would want to engage with it. So it's like, I think we were very much past the point of realizing that not all heat is good heat, brother.
Oh, no, definitely. And I think, because there's different elements of looking at it. There's the way of, like, I was talking about earlier about kayfabe versus shoot. But also, wrestling doesn't exist within a void. Like, he, whether or not he wanted to be, was a representative of the business as a whole. And the fact that it was him who was getting in the news all the time for all these, like, criminal cases, as you mentioned earlier, is a poor reflection of what the business is.
Yeah, for sure. I think
a lot of wrestling fans who maybe are surrounded by people who don't watch much wrestling, it must be really frustrating to have that be one of the names that's flung around as like, but wrestling's just like that, isn't it?
But I feel for every person who gets turned off in that way in this day and age, like, as we were mentioned, there's kind of a cultural resonance with New Jack that has long lasted since his career ended, because it's like so different from other wrestling. It's like, oh, it's kind of almost touching on some of that kind of true crime element.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're at a point once again where the wrestler who seems to be like different from other wrestlers because they're real is kind of engaging with non-fans, which is probably what drew like a lot of my brother and his friends into the likes of New Jack to begin with. It's definitely tricky stuff to deal with. It's very much the dark magic of professional wrestling.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, from Alone in a Box. I think it's oversimplistic to label New Jack as an unhinged psycho with no redeeming qualities. I'm under no illusion that he's made some wrong choices and reacted certain ways in situations that he shouldn't have. That being said, I've heard so many people, including those you wouldn't expect to get on with him, describe him as friendly and cordial as long as you treated him with respect. A truly unique wrestler who embodied the word aura before that label started to be thrown at everyone. And who was also married to one of the most surprisingly white women you'll ever see.
Yeah, we were again shocked to bejesus to find that out.
His Instagram that he used quite regularly is really sweet. He's got some really lovely pictures of him hanging out with friends at just like the pub, and like him and his wife, and they're a really cute couple.
I think there's a lot of fans who I saw when I was reading up on him on like old forum posts and Reddit threads and stuff like that, who say like when they met him he was like complete cordial gentleman.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Like how much of it is an act? Which side of it is an act? Is it the cordial side or is it the unhinged psychopath side?
I think they're both part. Like wrestling is a great place to go for many people who want to escape real life and all that. And certainly if it allows you to kind of compartmentalize a little bit. Because we've seen lots of wrestlers who compartmentalize the nice side of them, the charismatic, engaging, fun side of them. That's them as the wrestling character. Then in real life, they're fucking horrible to fans and they're horrible to deal with. There's plenty of cases of that. Shitty fan interactions notwithstanding. But I do believe that both of those elements of him are, exaggerated truths of the same person. He's, he is both. He's all of the above, I think, which is kind of hard to get your head around. But like, I'm under no false impressions that a lot of people who meet wrestlers, like whether you realize it or not, like you can come across as a way as a fan that immediately makes them be like, I'm in character now, or I'm going to like be kind of off-put you, or whatever it is. No one says anything but nice things about Terry Funk, but I met him at an airport and he was horrible, but I interrupted the man.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say like, oh, he's a bastard because of that.
Well, it's interesting that there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no stories of New Jack like having fights with fans.
No, it usually seems to be the other wrestlers who he really takes problems with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that in itself is, I guess, an interesting element of it, is that, you know, a lot of the negativity comes to be from other workers. And again, I don't see a whole long list of people being like, hey, Vic Grimes was a lovely lad, or Hunter Red was a lovely lad, or Gypsy Joe's a lovely lad. Like, I don't really kind of know much about these guys kind of outside of the stories as it relates to New Jack.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it was something that everyone bore the brunt of, and it does really kind of lend itself to think that maybe that was a part set aside for the professional wrestling aspect of things.
But that also makes you think then, does that mean he had more control over his actions than maybe he'd like people to think?
Maybe he's like Festus Joe. Once that bell rang, once that music hit. See how he acts when Natural Born Killers was being played or not. That's how you can really tell how New Jack was.
Next up from Brandy J. Watching New Jack in Smoky Mountain Wrestling on YouTube 5 to 10 years ago is some of the most electric I felt watching pro wrestling.
Hell yeah.
The audacity to say the things he said, where he said them, is something I'd never seen. I doubt we'll see anything like it again, for better and for worse. I'm from nearby the territory and I know a lot of those towns. No one was exaggerating the danger on his dark side of the ring. They really were that precariously close to shit going sideways. Gun culture wasn't as extreme then, but you better bet that those good old boys were packing heat.
Definitely.
And it could have escalated really quickly.
Yeah, there is an unspeakable element of danger that I think that just adds to that. Like, I didn't find myself, usually when wrestling promos are going on, I'm like watching the performer, particularly if they're as engaging and as electric as New Jack is. And again, 10 out of 10 promos. I cannot stop thinking about
great,
them.
yeah.
But I don't think I've ever seen as engaging a performer that makes me look at the audience though at the same time, because the audience's reaction was so captivating. Because I don't think you can rile someone up like that without, you know, the show being ended now. You know, for that, those days are long and truly gone, I think. How would you feel like if you were like one of, because, you know, Smoky Mountain's got a huge audience. We've been to wrestling shows of like comparable sizes. And obviously you're not racist, but like, if you were in the audience when something really fucking spicy was happening like that, like, how would that make you feel? Even though you weren't like kind of be like riled up by it or whatever it was, but you know that someone is like, this guy's playing with absolute fire. Maybe the people in the audience beside me are.
It's impossible.
You know, I can't really.
Yeah, I literally can't imagine, because
there's lads from Liverpool who come to our local
yeah,
indie show who are like,
closest.
we like Liverpool. Boo! No! Ah! But there's no guns in the audience.
No, it is all in good fun as
It
well.
is, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think the Manchester Liverpool thing outside of football is a work
Yeah,
as much as anything.
I was being a silly sausage there.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I think where we are and the time we are in, it's just completely unfathomable to be at a wrestling show where there would be that kind of, and I don't even want to call it heat, because it goes beyond heat.
Yeah,
it's just,
definitely. It's touching a nerve.
yeah, like
Yeah.
racial tension.
And I kind of feel like if anyone did that now, it would almost be kind of, I don't want to say they'd be accused of being a try-hard, but it felt like where New Jack was, it was like he was saying what was never said before. And like,
Yeah.
we're like 30 years past that point. So I do, in essence, think that if someone tried to do that kind of saying the unsayable type of a thing now, it's kind of like, well, saying the unsayable is, in some respects, feels like it has come and went, and that has happened in wrestling, and now we're kind of on, people like would rather have a more, I don't know, like dynamic, creative fiction as opposed to just touching on, here's something from the news, and because I think we're so polarized now.
I think so,
that
and I think
it would be bad vibes.
I think as
There's
well.
bad vibes there as well, mind.
Maybe I'm very naive to think this, but I do think those hateful types of views are a vocal minority now, rather than a frightening majority. Wherein, you know, this whole thing we were talking about earlier in the episode about people in the KKK being cops and firefighters and like upstanding members of society, like, just, it's, again, it's like, if we had something like that now, it would be like, oh, there's the guy over there who's like crazy, and we don't listen to him, and we'll all probably boo at him if he tries anything.
I'm sure there's people in America who are probably going to politely disagree with
Maybe
it,
that's
you
it.
know?
But that's again my point, is that, like, for me as an English person in Salford, I can't relate to that experience now, because
it feels like a different world, like,
it is another world to me, and if it does still exist, well then I would love to hear from those people as to how that could even work today.
I think any promoter though would push that away with a 10-foot barge pole.
Well,
you know,
the fact
I think
that, the fact that even at the time it didn't make any
goddamn
money,
like, yeah.
Come on.
The KKK just don't go to the wrestling matches anymore, folks.
Good, we've worked them out of the territories. Finally, from Possum in a Dark Meadow, broke all my ideas of what a wrestler and wrestling match could be. His matches were wrestling found footage horror. Innovative, unsettling, brutal, captivating. Like Jake Roberts, New Jack was credible because you knew it all came from within. Shame about the true hate in his heart.
I think that is a very nice way to sum up a lot of my thoughts. I think a lot of yours as well. And I do think that's a nice little bow to put on it, because I think what we watched here today and a lot of what we did research, there's wrestling matches and then there's New Jack matches. You know, no one's ever like, did you see the great wrestling match with New Jack? People were always going to be like, did you see that New Jack match or that thing that New Jack did?
Yeah.
They don't feel like traditional wrestling matches. It is something, you know, completely wholly unique. And that in itself is such a rarity in wrestling, because I don't think there's anyone where you could say that is, you know, that they have a style or a type of match that's just wholly them and is not derivative or a wink and a nod to someone else from another promotion or from the past or whatever it is. And if that in itself can be an enduring legacy, and you know, the point there about it coming from within, I still believe all the stories I've heard were like, oh, he was very cordial and nice when I met him, or also, you know, he's this horrible, scary person who did these unspeakable things. Again, I think that's all from within. I think that is what he was doing, and I think he was constantly working himself one side against the other, depending on the audience. You can see that man shift in real time in interviews when he's trying to suss out what it is the people want from him, and or what he wants to give him, for that matter. Like, fascinating. Like, you know, whatever you say about him, like, no matter if you like him or don't, you cannot deny, for a man who takes fucking very little in the way of actual wrestling in his matches, probably one of the most fascinating guys we've ever done an episode on.
I think so, and I think the most emblematic of ECW.
Yeah, in a weird way. Even though I was a lifelong ECW head or whatever it is, I really feel like ECW and Heyman and the whole culture of hardcore wrestling took a lot from New Jack.
Yeah, I just don't believe it could have existed without him. He's so representative of the good and the bad of ECW.
Definitely.
The really exciting, never seen before matches that were so violent and scary and also kind of cool, but also the cruelty of the audience and the culture at the time.
Definitely, I think so. And I also believe without him, there isn't that kind of link that ECW and a lot of kind of hardcore underground wrestling has and still has to a lot of counterculture and a lot of underground culture and stuff like that. I think he was a huge, huge part of that. But I kind of feel like had there not been any ECW, New Jack still probably would have found his way in other places and still gained that legend.
Yeah, but it's just, what would that have looked like? I just feel like the New Jack we know of and the New Jack that is remembered today is only that way because of ECW.
Yes, there certainly would have been no Grand Theft Auto without New
Jack. That's it.
Well, folks, an interesting episode to be sure, and we're very happy to tell you that our next episode is going to be about one of the most important factions in the history of professional wrestling, and one that Joe and I have inexplicably, unwittingly, been researching for like the last year, because we've been putting on WCW Nitro from 96 onwards. We're all the way up to near the end of 1998 now, and we've been watching the actions unfold of the New World Order, brother. That's right, NWO, the NWO, the New World Organization. We're going to learn about one of the most iconic, one of the most maligned, one of the most important, and also one of the most reinvented factions in the history of professional wrestling. Joe, I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited. I feel like I know nothing about the NWO.
Even though you reviewed NWO Sold Out 1998. You saw the inaugural Miss NWO contest.
That's true. That is all true.
It's going to be an interesting episode because we have done, obviously, a Hogan ep, we've done a Hall, we've done a Nash, we've done a Bischoff. But I think all these things together, and also kind of a little bit more of a backdrop about WCW itself, I think this is going to provide a really interesting window into what it was like in, what was it then, the hottest company in wrestling in the world.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's just a case of having to know about those players, because I think so much of the NWO, and maybe I'm wrong saying this, but I feel more confident doing this episode, having done a lot of the pay-per-view classics we've done into early WWF, the new generation stuff, which the NWO era of WCW was very much rebelling against. I feel you need that to kind of understand why the NWO was so pivotal.
And I think also as well, like, you know, watching our
Yeah, the good and the bad.
The good and the bad. I'm really excited for this one because there are absolute heady highs of the main run of the NWO, and there's also some of the confusing weird stuff like the B Team, the Latino World Order, the NWO and WWE, NWO 2000, and I'm really excited to look into some of the stuff like NWO Japan with, the Great Muta and NWO Sting and Chono, for goodness sake. It's going to be kind of a globe-trotting adventure because the NWO's roots lie actually in Japan as well, something we touched on very briefly in the Bischoff episode. We'll be looking at there's a new book that's come out about the NWO. We'll be researching that. We'll be watching a lot of Nitro. We're going to be looking at some of the documentaries that have been made about the NWO and some of the endearing myths about the legacy of the NWO. If anyone can explain to me, the ever confused 30 years scratching his head man who wants to know what in goodness name the Wolfpack was and why we all started cheering these guys in NWO shirts, I would really like to know. And as always, you can let us know your thoughts about the new episode over on Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, or patreon.com/HowToWrestling, HowToNWO, or next episode. Until next time, folks, where we're going to look about that organization of good brothers, it's a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How To Wrestling.
See ya.